Tipp today in association with Slattery's of Pecan, your main Peugeot dealer for over 50 years in the Premier County. Slattery'sGarage.ie.
Good morning, welcome along to Tipp Today, live from Nina this beautiful morning. 1800 938 007, that's our free phone number if you want to give us a call. And Leanne is producing. Coming up on the show this morning, Joe Leahy from Seesaw will join us to discuss the growing concern around knife crime. We'll be hearing from Deputy Michael Murphy on the Oireachtas chairs seeking to up their wages by another 10 grand a year. Peadar Tóibín, the leader of Aontú, will share his views on the EU migration and Asylum Pact. Dr. Frank O'Connor of the Derelict Ireland movement will be with us to talk about the challenge of dereliction and vacancy right across the country. We'll also examine the controversy surrounding What's the Tea by transgender author Juno Dawson. And what's the debate all about? Well, we will find out. Thomas Conway will join us with the latest on the global news. Paul has all of the sport. And Councillor Michael Brennan will join us to discuss repeated incidents of interference with life-saving emergency equipment in a particular area of the county. So all of that and much, much more on the way. You can text and WhatsApp 083 311 3311. Now we have a lovely competition for you as well. Our great friends at Slattery's of Nina, they're celebrating their 80 years in business, and to mark the occasion they've given us a €50 voucher to give away every single morning this week on Tipp Today. So to be in with a chance to win, all you have to do is text or WhatsApp Slattery's to 083 311 3311, followed by your name and your details, and we will choose a winner of that €50 voucher a little later on in the programme. Let's have a look at the front pages of some of your newspapers today. The Irish Daily Mail and their main story, and a really unfortunate one as well. A pensioner with severe high blood pressure was discharged from hospital in the small hours of the morning despite protests by medics and refused readmission to their nursing home. That's according to the Mail today. Now, the patient, who was nearly 80, was removed from University Hospital Limerick at around 1:30 a.m. in April. And it happened despite protests from nurses and other healthcare professionals over her condition at the country's most overcrowded hospital. Let's have a look at the Irish Independent, and then right across the newspapers today, coverage of the Munster final. And the Irish Indo front page is dominated by a wonderful photograph of Limerick's Cian Lynch lifting the McBackey Cup. But what's really amazing about this is he's got his little son in his arms as he's raising the cup, but the little boy is not at all impressed, and it looks like he's going to cry. But anyway, the headline there is Treaty Men's triumph brings a tear to little eyes. The lead story on the Indo today: management at the Rotunda Hospital are adamant that it's legal for consultants to do additional private work once they have permission from the hospital. Now, as you're probably aware at this point, the hospital remains in standoff with the Health Minister, Jennifer Carroll McNeill, who says that obstetricians on public-only contracts cannot also see private patients. Let's have a look at the Irish Times, and again dominated by a photograph from yesterday's Munster final. This time, Limerick manager John Kiley clenches his fist in a celebration after winning the hurling final against Cork in Páirc Uí Chaoimh by a point, 121 to 217. Also reading on the Times today that Garda headquarters facing a race against time to increase the size of the force due to a ticking time bomb of retirement. And also on the Times, Martin Wall has a piece about Irish Rail and their centralised control system to oversee the movement of trains has just 2 spare central processing units. Now, that's heightening the risk of service disruption, as you can imagine, its company directors have told. And also, on the front of the Times today, Conor Pope is telling us that parents and those looking after infant children have been warned not to buy or use pillows marketed as baby sleep accessories, as they pose a risk of death. through either suffocation or indeed overheating. And we look at the Irish Examiner, and probably my favourite photograph from yesterday's Munster final is Sean Finn and Garrod Hegarty celebrating Limerick's win over Cork in the Munster final, but it looks like one of them is carrying the other. It's a great photograph. Also on the Examiner today, and something we'll be talking about pretty soon with Peadar Tóibín, elements of the new EU Migration and Asylum Pact would make English far-right agitator Tommy Robinson blush. And they are incredibly regressive. That's according to an Irish MEP. And also on the Examiner today, laws enabling the establishment of a public register of the names of domestic abusers could be in place within weeks. So that's a look at what's making headlines on some of your newspapers today. If you'd like to comment on any of that, you can text to WhatsApp 083 311 3311, or indeed you can email tiptoday@tippfm.com. Now, knife crime is once again under the spotlight following 2 fatal incidents in Dublin in recent weeks. At the same time, newly released figures from the Central Statistics Office show that offences involving weapons and explosives increased by 6% last year, adding to concerns about public safety, as you can imagine. Now, the issue has also generated significant debate online, with many people expressing alarm at what they perceive to be a growing trend of knife-related violence right across the country. To discuss the figures and indeed the concern around this, delighted to be joined by a great friend of ours, Joe Leahy, and Joe, of course, security consultant and founder of Seesaw. Good morning to you, Joe.
Good morning, Fran.
And good to talk to you today. Are you surprised at the rise in figures of knife crime, Joe?
I'm not really, Fran, because I suppose if you look at it, if you stand back and take a look at this, and you balance it, it's a lot easier to get a knife than it is to get a firearm. That's number one. A lot easier to conceal a knife than to conceal a firearm. With a firearm, you've got to get ammunition to go with the firearm, which is another issue. Whereas with a knife, you can obtain it anywhere, I suppose every kitchen in the country has a block of knives, one way or another, which they're entitled to have, and they're all for domestic use and all that, so they're readily available. And I think the massive increase in drugs is leading to an awful lot of it, with this misconception, I suppose, of, misguided self-defense and that type of thing, that, I owe you a few bob and you're coming after me, so I must stand on my step to defend myself, and that type of stuff,
Yeah, because I heard, and I was really scared about this, Joe, I heard anecdotally that, even young lads who are not involved in drugs or other crime, that they are taking knives with them by way of protection. That's very scary, because you add a few drinks to that then, and a row erupts, and guess what? The knife is produced.
Well, absolutely, and I totally agree with you, Fran, but I think a lot of that, some of that, is, as I said, is misguided to this hard man attitude, for a teenager, look what I'm carrying, I'm tougher than you are, look what I have this, and I'm the tough man. But people, young people, it's very hard to get through to some young people, and, the situation at home wouldn't be the greatest with a lot of these people that were involved in this. So where's the guidance and where's the advice? And, but another statistic I think that should be looked at, now I don't have the results of it, and I suppose you probably don't either, is how many of these people that are involved in this are actually doing a day's work. How many of them are going out working? And how many of them are just lying around? It's a peculiar mindset. As I've often said to people, one person gets up in the morning, about to go to work, goes in, has the shower, gets the deodorant, and then heads out to work. Another person gets up at 11:30, has the shower, and then where's my knife? So I think the mindset of a lot of this thing is very troublesome, it's very worrying, but it's also, if it gets into a row situation, then it's instant reaction to it, your skin is only the size of the depth of the side of an A4 sheet of paper, so it's only, as they say, skin deep. So it's very easy to cut skin, very easy to get through your organs. You hit a person in the heart, you hit a person in the kidneys, in the liver, on an artery. You're talking about murder, you're talking about manslaughter in seconds. So it can escalate very, very quickly from just carrying a knife, as you say, to something much more serious.
Do we need to look at the sale of these knives as well? Because I've been in a couple of places, Joe, where there's the most gruesome looking knives for sale, quite legally, quite openly as well. Do we need to look at that?
We certainly do, Fran. The thing is, You know, if we have any bit of common sense about it at all, you know, let's be honest, like, who needs knives? You know, okay, people out working in the trade, people in, say, butchers, they're naturally in that meat trade, they have to have knives, you know, and stored away at night and put in a safe place. And, you know, farmers going to have a knife there for opening bags of manure or something like this, you know, that type of stuff. People may be doing weaving or doing basket making or things like that. You go back then to different types of weapons that could look like a knife. We'll say, like, you know, that you see the Boy Scouts maybe doing for erecting tents or that type of thing, you know.
Yeah.
They're fine. They're all regulated. But when you go into this kind of a hunting shop, you know, and you see all these bloody yokes like this, they're not a disgrace. Like, you see blades a foot long. What does anyone need those for, like?
Yeah.
You know, there's not many people going to kill a wild boar, like, around the place, you know. So, there's no need for these at all. And I think they should be just banned, outrightly banned, you know.
Yeah, isn't it interesting though, Joe? And you and I have had many conversations about the issue around drugs, but anything like knife crime, gun crime, all of that, you can trace it all back to the drugs, and to the supply and demand for drugs, can't you?
You can indeed, Fran. And it's all about as well, you know, it's all about, Fran, intimidation. Yeah. You know, I need to get the money off you. You need to pay me. I say, Fran, you know, I need money there. I need €100, €150. You owe me that for drugs, and you tell me take a hike. Now I need to escalate. So now I need to raise at another level. So how do I raise at another level? You're not one bit afraid of me. No point in going to throw over the hurley. That's not going to bloody work. So now I'm going to have to go to something more serious. But as you say yourself, that's where you carry the knife. That's where you go in with these things. But now look, all back to drugs. And it is all back to drugs. Every whole bit of all this is back to drugs. Yeah, I can't say every whole bit of it, because you have violence, you know, you have it in domestic situations as well, and where knives can be used, and it mightn't be drugs or anything like that. You can have different aspects to that. But the reality of it is, amongst an awful lot of these young people that are out there, you know, it is drug related, one way or another.
Yeah, it's incredible. And, you know, back to your own early days with the Gardaí and the like, you know, the worst you'd see would be a bit of pushing and shoving and maybe a couple of fisticuffs or something. It's different now, isn't it?
Actually, listen, Fran, I was talking to somebody there about over the weekend. You know, like, if you go back 10 years and then you go back 20 years.
Yeah.
But about 20 years ago, you wouldn't hear head nor tail of this. There might be, you know, an odd one here and there, maybe, you know. But nowadays, it's every second person. And nowadays, the reality is you're walking up the street, and this is any street in any town in Ireland, any street. You have no idea the young person coming down against you, and the not so young person coming down against you that's carrying a knife or carrying some type of concealed weapon. You just don't know. Like, and you don't know what they're at. And then the problem is that it escalates very quickly. If people get into a row, you know, all of a sudden there's somebody on the footpath, the next thing there's the ambulance, next thing the guard, the next thing they're charged with manslaughter, charged with murder. And it has gone out of total control in seconds. You know, young people need to be very, very... It's very difficult to educate young people when they're not just going to school and they're not taking it in and they're leading a life of crime. How do you get through to them, like? Because their peers in prison are telling them, no, to hell with the law, you know, take the law, to mind the law, you know, the mind authorities, they don't know what they're talking about. You listen to me, and there's plenty of money in drugs, and this is the way to go. And they're all gone down the wrong road, and it's very, very difficult to pull back once you get on that road. You'd often talk there to John Leahy about the addiction services and all that. You know, they're great, they're powerful. But many people, you know, actually go to them from this aspect of life. You know, from this side of life. A lot of the people that go to them, they want that family support. But you have this other element of society who you just can't capture. You can't get into their mindset, you know.
And for fear people might think that we're just talking about the cities and just talking about Dublin, as you say yourself, you know, every town and village indeed would have issues like this. And I know Clonmel recently had some issues around this too, Joe.
They had it from, but I see, I was reading it there the other day where there was a guy, you know, at a bank machine taking out his few bob, and he was approached, and there was a guy convicted of it, you know, and that can happen in an instant. Like, so people need to be alert, people need to be aware of doing these things. But I suppose the reality of all these things is, you know, where the bank link is or where the post office link is, there's going to be good CCTV coverage. So the chances of them getting away are going to be slim. You know, once the injured party isn't hurt. But you go back like to a lot of these drug dealers. A lot of these drug dealers nowadays, Fran, they're in the most, they're in totally rural, isolated places. They're operating from villages, from less than villages. They're operating from up boreens and down laneways and totally unsuspected, but they're operating away nice and quietly, and then some are not so quietly. But they're in every village and town. It's not cities. It's not just big towns or big population. These are operating everywhere. And one of the things, the thinking plan behind it was, if I'm a drug dealer, so if I move out to a country village, there's going to be no guards there to keep an eye on me. There's going to be less guards to stop me on the road. So I have a lot freer reign to do my own trade and to do my own business out there. So that's another problem. And then, you hear there today that one of the things is, coming up concerning the Garda management is the number of retirees that are coming in the next 12 or 18 months. And there's a massive problem within the Guards. And one of the massive problems within the Guards, and I've said this to you several times, is this internal strife that's going on. I know an awful lot of Guards, and they're not one bit afraid to tackle criminals and all that. But every time they tackle them or they do something, then they're all questioned within. Now,
they're investigated and
investigated. They're suspended for years and years, left in limbo land. I don't need to go through it; it's highlighted enough. Yeah. Left in limbo land. Now, I'm not taking for 1 second that some person that does criminal activity, he'd been a guard or he'd been a teacher or he'd been an architect or he'd been anything, they should be dealt with by the law regardless of what profession they are. But what they are. That's the law. That's everybody, and that's what should be done. But these other people, there's a complete hierarchy within the framework of the network of the Garda Síochána, which investigates their own, and they have the power then to suspend them, and they do all this kind of thing. And people are out there, families in limbo land, left with. I know one person, for example, who had to restructure all their mortgage, all their financial loans, and everything else, just because it wouldn't be certified that they were injured on duty. To turn around 4 years later and certify they were injured on duty. So why people put people through all that, and then you're trying to encourage people to join the Guards? Makes no sense in the way that they work. None. They need to look at themselves first to sort that out.
All right, Joe, pleasure as always. Thanks for your time this morning, Joe. Thank you. Good morning to you. Bye-bye. That's our good friend Joe Leahy there. Joe, of course, is a security consultant, but we know him best as the founder of the wonderful organisation that is Seesaw. Barbara was on, and she says, Fran, we now have people openly carrying ceremonial knives across their bodies in Ireland, and in many of the incidents being reported, those carrying them are also the ones using them. Cultural or religious traditions should be respected, but public safety has to come first, and the law should apply equally to everyone. Why are they allowed to carry these ceremonial knives? If these items are being used in violent incidents, then exemptions and traditions need to be reviewed. Public safety should be the priority, regardless of who is carrying the weapon. I wasn't across that, to be honest with you, Barbara. I must have a look at that and see what the background to that is. We'll take a break, back with more in just a moment.
Tipp FM's Tip Today.
With Slattery's Garage, Puck On. Main Peugeot dealers in the Premier County. And now stocking the full range of the luxury French car brand DS Automobiles. Book your test drive today with Slattery's Garage, Puck On. See slatterysgarage.ie. Tip Today, in association with Slattery's of Pecan, your main Peugeot dealer for over 50 years in the Premier County. slatterysgarage.ie.
The EU Migration and Asylum Pact will come into effect on this Friday, June 12th. Now, Ireland officially opted into the Pact in June of 2024, and in the intervening 2 years, the government has been adopting legislation to enact the Pact. But what is it all about? What does it mean for Ireland? Well, Aontú Deputy Peadar Tóibín joins me now. Good morning to you, Peadar.
Good morning, how are you?
I'm well, and thank you for your time this morning. The Irish government, their stated reasons for opting in to the Migration and Asylum Pact, Peadar, are mainly about making the asylum system faster, more coordinated with the rest of Europe, and reducing what it calls secondary movement, which is people applying for asylum in multiple EU countries or moving between them. What is your take on this?
So first of all, the EU Migration Pact is a pact that outsources decision-making from the national parliament and from the Dáil to the European Union. So instead of this government being able to make free choices in terms of our decisions on migration, now Brussels has the power to determine what countries should do. So we've signed up to a number of aspects to this, but one of the problems with this EU Migration Pact is it can be changed in future, and it can be changed without a veto. So in other words, what we've signed up to may not actually be the final product in terms of the EU Migration Pact. Also, if countries don't accept certain numbers of migrants, or if they don't pay for migrants that they don't accept, the EU can fine that country. And as a country, we're already getting fined left, right and centre. I don't know if you saw it during the week, we're getting fined for the cutting of turf at the moment by the EU. So we're signing up to a pact which will allow for the EU to fine us in the future. And already Jim O'Callaghan has confirmed that Ireland will make a financial contribution of €9 million to the EU next year in relation to this pact. So the major problem is it is a reduction in sovereignty. It takes the power away from our own Dáil to make these decisions. It gives the power to the European Parliament, who don't necessarily make decisions on the interests for Ireland, but often make their decisions for the interests of other countries. Now, your introduction stated that this seeks to speed up the process. We've been calling as a party, Aontú has been calling as a party for the speeding up of the process for a long period of time. There's nothing stopping the Irish government speeding up the process themselves. Indeed, many people, there's 32,000 IPAS applications pending now at the moment between initial applications and appeals. And many of those have been going on for months, and some of them for years. And at the heart of the problem there is the lack of resources that the government are affording this space. So we've been calling for these decisions to be made within 12 weeks from when a person lands in the state to, the end of the whole process within 12 weeks. And the government has refused to do that. And interestingly enough, now, because of the EU Migration Pact, they have to speed it up. But if they don't do it, they'll get fined. And I have no doubt they'll be fined in the future in relation to this.
Yeah, Sorry, do go on. I beg your pardon. Yeah.
Yeah, also there is an element in this, the solidarity clause. And the solidarity clause states that basically many countries along the Mediterranean especially have a large number of people who are landing illegally and then applying for asylum. And in those situations, many of those people will be redistributed through the European Union to take the burden off those Mediterranean countries. And as a result, then you can have a situation where people will be brought, Ireland will have to accept a certain number of people in that process as well.
Yeah, they are holding their hands, the government, they're holding their hand up at this point and saying really that, the migration pressures, it can't be dealt with effectively by individual countries anymore. So basically they're saying they can't deal with this and they require some sort of common EU framework, which is the Pact.
So we have no problem with cooperation, and cooperation is a good thing in these terms. Now, let's just make clear, the reason why we've had a phenomenal pressure put in this country, and we've about, if you take in the last 5 years, on average, we have 100,000 people coming into this state. And that's like the population of Galway City. If you bring the population of Galway City into a country on an annual basis, without building the infrastructure of Galway City, remember they have about 3 hospitals, they have about 2 universities, they have dozens of schools, they've nearly 100 schools, and they have tens of thousands of homes. If you don't build that infrastructure every year with those numbers coming in, you're going to come under fierce pressure. People won't be able to get housing, rents will go up, house prices will go up, etc. And that's what the government have been running for the last while. And the key element that we needed to do was make sure that Ireland was a strict place for immigration. So Denmark is another liberal democratic country like Ireland. It has implemented a far stricter system over the last 10 years. And as a result, the numbers of people going to Denmark have fallen significantly. And the way to do it is to make sure, first of all, that when people come in, their applications are processed really speedily. If they fail and get a deportation order, that those deportation orders are actually fulfilled. And up to 85% of the situation of the government situations, deportation orders were voluntary. They weren't fulfilled, which is incredible. The governments didn't even have exit checks on the borders, so that they didn't even know whether a person had left the country or not. Indeed, the government were allowing 5,000 people coming through Dublin Airport without passport or travel documents. Again, a ridiculous situation. And also the government were providing social welfare and housing supports here that were greater than other European countries. And as a result, that acted as a pull factor in bringing people to Ireland. So this country could have fulfilled its international responsibilities. It could have had a policy which was compassionate, which did help those who were fleeing war and violence, but was strict and made sure that nobody was coming to Ireland who wasn't entitled to come to Ireland. But it failed to do that. There's nothing in preventing our government implementing that. Now the government has similar objectives, but now it's going to be fined, and those objectives are not controlled by the democratic will of the people, but by Brussels, which is not going to make decisions in Ireland's favour.
What about the fact that many migrants come from the UK and come through Northern Ireland? Where will that fit into all of this?
Yes, this is the big hole in the EU Migration Pact. So the governments are selling the EU Migration Pact as a method to control immigration. But again, and this is more information that Aontú found out, because it's quite startling. Like we had to ask the Minister for Foreign Affairs and the Minister for Justice nearly for 2 years how were people getting into the country. I was looking at the figures, and the vast majority of people were being registered in the International Protection Office in Dublin. And I was going, that's really strange. If people coming to Ireland, you'd imagine they would be registering at the airports or at the ports. And I asked the minister, well, how are people getting into the country? And the minister said she didn't know. And I said, what do you mean you don't know? Like, are you not asking them the question? And she says, no, we don't ask the question of people coming into the country, how they got into the country. Now, I couldn't understand this, because anybody with an ounce of interest in this, never mind the minister earning nearly 200,000 euros, would be asking that question. And it took about 2 years for the minister to finally answer that question. And now we know that 85% of the people coming into this state are coming from Britain through the north of Ireland. And this does nothing in relation to that. It is completely ignorant in relation to that process. Now, the solution to this is an Irish sea border. So that if a person is moving from, let's say, Liverpool or Glasgow or London to Ireland, north or south, and there are migrants, that they would have to apply as soon as they land in either Belfast or Dublin. And in that scenario, we could control the people coming into the island of Ireland, and we could reduce the numbers. Right now, we have no control over that. It's impossible to control the border north-south, because there's 270 roads, there's 10,000 fields. You know, how are we going to stop people moving across that border? We need an Irish sea border. And there is a precedence for that. If you remember, the whole Brexit Windsor framework situation brought an Irish sea border for the movement of goods.
Yes.
And if they can do that for the movement of goods, they can definitely do that for the movement of people.
Have you concerns around these return hubs as well? Because across the newspapers today, I see that the Labour MEP Reardon is saying that elements of the new EU Migration and Asylum Pact would make English far-right agitator Tommy Robinson blush, and that they're incredibly regressive. How do you feel about that?
Well, I don't agree with Aon or Reardon. I think the whole idea of these third-party return centres are that if individuals are coming into a country illegally, or if they are, they have not fulfilled their obligations in terms of asylum, and that they can be held potentially in a location in a safe country outside of the EU. So in other words, there's talk that Albania or Turkey or other countries will enter into a legal contract with the European Union, or for that matter, individual European countries, and that individuals can be held in those locations while their asylum applications are being processed. And I think, to be honest, that makes sense to a certain extent. So if you or I were going to the United States of America, we would apply to get in before we landed. We wouldn't just land and say, listen, guys, we're here. Can I apply to get a visa? So you would do pre-clearance at Shannon Airport. So this process is similar in that individuals would look to achieve pre-clearance before they come to the European Union.
His comparison, though, is to ICE and what's happening in the States, and he's saying that it's giving an open door, for example, for member states to have raids of hospitals and raids of private employment and homes if a member state wishes to do so.
No, obviously what we saw in relation to ICE in America was shocking, and that was outstanding in its ignorance and in its manner in which it treated other human beings. Nobody wants to see that. And I think even in America, and even proponents of stricter immigration in America would see that as an extremely stupid manner in which to approach the whole immigration system. But if you have a law, and if a person is coming to this country who doesn't have a right to be here, who has maybe is to be deported, you have a right to implement that law. And that implementation will at times involve the use of Gardaí. And we would hope that people who come to the country would, be law-abiding in the same way as, citizens are expected to be law-abiding. And if individuals have to be removed from the country, so be it. If you have an immigration system that is spending hundreds of millions of euros working out whether a person is entitled to stay here or not, and then when it comes to a decision to find out that they're not entitled to stay here, that has to be implemented. If it's not implemented, what's the point of having the system? If the outcome for everybody, whether they are successful or fail the immigration system, is the same, that they remain in Ireland, which is then the whole thing's a sham.
Can I bring up a couple of things with you that we'll be discussing a little later on in the programme? What's the Tea? That book by Juno Dawson was featured on Children's Books Ireland's Read with Pride 2026 guide, which was promoted through RTE's Kids Book Club. You were calling at this stage, there's such controversy around that now at this point, and the book has been taken off the list. But you're calling for Children's Books Ireland to be brought before an Oireachtas committee to explain the inclusion in the first place.
Yeah, so first of all, this book had content within it, which was aimed for 15-year-old children. And the content was, first of all, highly explicit, and it was adult content. And I mean, it was so explicit I wouldn't mention it on your show. Now, the content of that was also, if acted out for a 15-year-old child, most likely illegal as well, because it was a 15-year-old child is younger than the age of consent. And here we have, first of all, a Children's Books Ireland, an organisation heavily funded from the taxpayer, RTE putting it on a reading list, which is heavily funded by the taxpayer. And then Minister Fianna Fáil, Minister Norma Foley, when asked, incapable of just saying that this is wrong. It is incredible what has happened to Fianna Fáil over these years, that, a very, very simple question in relation to highly graphic sexualized behavior aimed at children, that a minister could not just say, listen, this is wrong, this is shocking. And, there is a strong feeling that there is, I suppose, an ideological campaign within some of these groups to really, I suppose, bring their culture wars into the classroom and into children's lives. And children have a right to be children, and they have a right to grow up without adult concerns. And, also, this was a highly reckless book as well. So we do believe that Children's Books Ireland should be brought into a Dáil committee to answer questions. This is not the first time that this organisation has been proven to be highly controversial. I've phoned this organisation a number of times over the last 5 years on the topic of certain books, and they've defended these books. So it's not like this is an accident they've made, or this is something that they they in hindsight realize should be fixed. This organisation is purposefully including this content for children, and I think it's shocking. I think most parents, if they were to see the material, would be themselves shocked. And again, it was just hard to believe that a Fianna Fáil minister couldn't answer a straight question on it.
Well, we'll be discussing that further in the next hour. Just finally, Peadar, Oireachtas committee chairs, they're seeking to boost their pay by €10,000 a year. Could cost the taxpayer, I understand, about €300,000 extra per annum. And Deputy Michael Murphy of Tipperary was named in the piece today in the Mail. We'll talk to him a little later on about this. But what are you making of that? Because you're quoted in the piece too.
Yeah, this is shocking, and it's a complete tone-deaf response from TDs and political parties in Leinster House. You know, we've just come out of a very, very significant protest period where literally Middle Ireland rose up because of the enormous economic pressure that they're under. You know, that people are suffering a cost of living crisis that is, you know, really, really hurting them. I had a carer come into my office who told me that she was minding an elderly gentleman. When she got to his house, you know, he was sitting in front of an electric oven with a door of the oven open to get heat from it because he couldn't afford, you know, home heating oil or timber for the fire. And here we have TDs who are already on salaries of about €120,000 looking for another 10 grand increase in their salaries. And, you know, it actually adds up to about 11,500 increase. And if you look at the pension for a whole year for an older person is about €15,000. You know, a TD in a cost of living crisis looking for a salary increase, which is nearly the same as a full income for an older person in Ireland, shows you the absolute tone-deaf nature of some of our politicians. It's absolutely wrong. And, you know, these are activities which are not that more laborious than just normal work as a TD. An extra bit of work as a chairperson of a committee is an opportunity. It's something that should be accepted with pride. It's a wonderful opportunity for a person to have. And now these individual TDs are looking for a pay increase, and we believe that's wrong. They should desist from that.
Thank you for your time this morning, Peadar. Thank you. Good morning to you. That's Aontú leader Peadar Tóibín speaking to us this morning. 1800 938 007.
Tipp FM's Tip Today.
With Slattery's Garage, Puck On. Main Peugeot dealers in the Premier County. And now stocking the full range of the luxury French car brand DS Automobiles. Book your test drive today with Slattery's Garage, Puck On. See slatterysgarage.ie. Tip Today, in association with Slattery's of Puckon, your main Peugeot dealer for over 50 years in the Premier County. slatterysgarage.ie.
The marketplace in Clonmel was once a thriving shopping area at the heart of the town of Clonmel. Today, it lies almost completely empty apart from one unit still operating there. But it's not just Clonmel. I mean, many of our town centres plagued with dereliction. And for campaigners like Dr. Frank O'Connor of the Derelict Ireland movement, places like Marketplace in Clonmel are not isolated cases but visible symptoms of a deeper systemic failure in Ireland. Dr. Frank O'Connor joins me now. Good morning to you, Frank.
Good morning, friend. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Good to talk to you today. You said that one of the most striking aspects of dereliction is how it's become culturally accepted at this point.
Yeah, and that's something that I was living away for a few decades, and me and my partner, Jerry, we moved back here in 2018, moved back to Cork City, and that was one thing that struck us when we came back after living in the Netherlands and living in the UK as well. How when we came back, the levels of vacancy and dereliction in Ireland, like you said in your introduction, they're across the country, but how people just accepted and said, look, that's the way things are. We've always had vacancy and dereliction, it's not an issue. And for us, it was an issue, particularly when you see so many people struggling to find a home, I mean, like in Tipperary, there's quite a few people without a home at the moment. There's a lot of people looking for social housing, and we've all these empty properties across the country. And Marketplace is obviously an example of extreme, I suppose, vacancy and dereliction. But any town or city in Ireland, you'll find it. And so that's why we started Derelict Ireland back in 2020. 6 years ago this month is the anniversary this month of starting the campaign. And obviously groups have supported us across the country, all campaigning as well, highlighting this as being a big issue, but also the fact that there are solutions as well. We could do something about it. And I suppose that's what we'd be trying to get across with the campaign, shine a bright light on it so people are talking about it. Now, as you probably know yourself, it's in the news probably most days in the media are covering vacancy and dereliction. But when we started 6 years ago, you only have the occasional article or the occasional conversation. So yeah, it's something that we've culturally accepted, and I suppose it's been with us since the foundation of the state. Really, we all probably grew up and saw vacant, derelict houses wherever we were, but we're in a situation now where it's got to such extreme levels, and we need homes so badly that obviously we've been campaigning to change that.
And you speak, Frank, about failures in policy and taxation, and particularly in enforcement. In other words, that there are existing laws there, but they're not being enforced. Is that fair to say?
That's definitely the case. And I suppose when we started the campaign, we did the research for about 2 years. First started, like I said, 6 years ago. And one of the things we noticed was, there was a derelict site law in place since 1990. So that's now 36 years in place. And it was never fully enforced. And obviously, because that wasn't fully enforced, obviously the dereliction increased. And obviously, of course, vacancy is the gateway to dereliction. So yeah, this law has been in place. And all derelict properties should be on a list. They should be paying a 7% levy every year. And also the council should be looking to compulsory purchase them after 2 years. But obviously the culture from the outset, from what we can gather from speaking to various people who work in local authorities across the country, that it was never taken seriously. And I suppose it does raise issues about property in Ireland anyway. People are, I suppose it's a difficult subject, and I suppose it's something we've been tackling now for quite a while here, but people often, it's someone else's property, we can't do anything about it. But when it's impacting your towns like Clonmel there, and impacting people getting homes, and also community spaces as well, there are, like, we pushed forward this policy toolbox, which we presented at the Oireachtas in 2021 and again last year. Jude and I presented a policy toolbox, and with that, we are arguing for obviously more enforcement. We've also put the case forward for the collection of those levies to move from the local authorities into revenue. Yes. They have agreed to do that, and that's actually happening now. And at the moment, they're making that change. So when revenue are collecting the levies, we think it will increase the enforcement, because revenue are good at collecting money. But also we need other policy measures as well. We should never have accepted in the first place, but also we shouldn't have people without a home when there's empty houses everywhere. I think in Tipperary alone, something like over 6,000 empty homes in Tipperary in the last census.
Which is incredible when you think of the situation we are in, where homelessness is concerned. There's been attempts to provide funding to people to do up above shops, for example, and to renovate them. But it seems to have failed rather miserably over the years, hasn't it?
Above shop one is, there's been a few attempts at above shop, and I think they're now pushing that again, and they've been introducing new measures again in the last year. But they also brought in as a result of our work, they brought in the vacancy and dereliction grants in the last few years as well. Now, they were not necessarily above shop. They were basically, if you have a vacant home, derelict home, you could apply for grants for 50,000 for vacancy and up to 70,000 for dereliction. Then you combine those with energy grants, you can get up to 9,000 or plus. But they have been successful. But I think a lot of people have struggled with their vacancy dereliction grants in terms of you need to have the money and you get paid in arrears. So I think that's a challenge for certain people. So what happens then is the people who have the money and maybe have multiple properties can get the grants, whereas the person who wants to get that vacant or derelict property themselves, to do it up themselves, it's harder for them to do that. But also a lot of the vacant derelict properties aren't necessarily up for sale. And I see there in the marketplace that they're talking about converting them probably back into offices. Now, I can understand offices might be needed, but if you look at Clonmel at the moment, there's a lot of empty offices. And, could we repurpose them back into homes? I mean, I think it's possible to do that,
Do we need to rethink our town centres as well? Because it seems to me that a lot of the owners of these premises, they're waiting for some business to come and open up in them. I mean, and that's not going to happen in town centres the way it used to do. So have we to completely rethink how we look at our towns?
Yeah, I suppose we've got to encourage people back into towns, and to encourage people back into our towns to live, we need to provide the kind of public luxury for them. So, like, if you want families to live in towns, like myself and my partner did, we decided to move into Cork City Centre, and at the time when we were doing that, people thought we were crazy. Why wouldn't we move out in the countryside? For us, it makes sense to live in an urban area because public transport, amenities, shops, cafes, you know the story. You've got everything nearby. And I think we need to get people to move back in so they become places where people live. And then obviously that will benefit your shops, because if you've got more people living in Clonmel town, they'll support your local shop, your cafe, your pub, whatever. And then also for cultural spaces as well. So I think we do need to rethink them. And, you know, unfortunately, a lot of the kind of financial things actually, it often incentivizes people to leave a property empty. I mean, for example, like if you leave your home, a derelict home empty, I mean, it goes up in value every year, as you know yourself. I mean, the house prices are crazy. I'm sure they're crazy in Clonmel. They're crazy all over the country. So there's a lot of incentives for almost leaving things empty, where actually what we need to do is, you know, the most sustainable buildings are the existing buildings. You know, we can repurpose what we have. And really, that should be the way forward. And like you're right, the town centres, they are a different model now. We won't have the same levels of retail before. But I've seen in Cork now, we've been in Cork now for 8 years, and I've seen a growth, and I'm sure you've seen it too in Clonmel places, in cafes and other type of enterprises, if you know what I mean. So there are, like, if you bring the people back in, you can see the businesses will grow around them, you know. But at the moment, like if you walk through Cork City or somewhere, there'll be so much empty space, which also makes it feel unsafe. You know, like, so when you got people living there, you come to thrive, there's a nice energy, community stuff happening, you know, whereas at the moment, all this vacancy and dereliction, it's eroding our towns, and people don't go in there, so they go out to town instead. So, yeah, I mean, definitely, we have to rethink it, and we have to rethink our relationship with property as well. I mean, we'd argue for compulsory rental of all vacant properties, you know. So in other words, you have to rent it, but if someone has a home. And we've also argued for compulsory sales of derelict properties, because like a derelict property, 5, 10, 15 years, some properties, you know yourself, they're there for 20, 30 years. They're an eyesore, they're dangerous, and they can crumble onto the ground. They obviously attract all kinds of other behaviour as well, because at the end of the day, it's vandalism to obviously to leave properties into long term. I mean, it impacts the whole community. So, yeah, I mean, for us, our towns, our cities, it's the way forward. If we're all about sustainability, we're all about climate, and we're all about the difficulties of moving around. If you get more people in, they can thrive again. And like I said, it's the same across the country, and that's why we started the campaign, you know.
Well, Dr. Frank O'Connor, most interesting conversation. Thank you so much indeed for coming on with us today. And it's Dr. Frank O'Connor there of the Derelict Ireland movement. How do you feel about that? I know I was sitting outside for to have a drink in Cashel there. Well, was it last week? I think it was last week at some point or other. And I couldn't help but look around at the amount of dereliction in the beautiful town of Cashel. And when you think about the town, and particularly since the palace is thriving there and doing so well, you'd imagine it shouldn't be the case in a town like that. You'd imagine that one business would lead to another. It doesn't seem to be the case, and a lot of dereliction there as well. So it's not just Clonmel. How do you feel about that? 083 311 3311. News and information's on the way.
Tipp FM's Tip Today.
With Slattery's Garage, Puck On. Main Peugeot dealers in the Premier County. And now stocking the full range of the luxury French car brand DS Automobiles. Book your test drive today with Slattery's Garage, Puck On. See slatterysgarage.ie. Tip Today, in association with Slattery's of Pecan, your main Peugeot dealer for over 50 years in the Premier County. slatterysgarage.ie.
Thanks, Pat, and you're welcome back to Tip Today. 1800 938 007. That's our free phone number. You can text and WhatsApp 083 311 3311. Now, the following segment contains discussions of sexual content and themes that some listeners might find sensitive, so listener discretion is advised, particularly if you have little ears around the house. Now, RTE has removed a link from its website to a Pride-themed reading reading guide produced by Children's Books Ireland, confirming that the decision was made for age-appropriate reasons. Now, the nature of the book, What's the Tea?, by transgender author Juno Dawson, was brought to light after Gript reporter Ben Scallon asked Children's Minister Norma Foley if she thought it was appropriate. And of course there was a whole load of controversy around that. But Sandra Adams is an advocate for women's sex-based rights, child safeguarding and fact-based education, and has been following the story and joins me now. Sandra, good morning to you.
Good morning, Fran.
And it's good to talk to you again, and thank you for coming on with us today. Would you just give us an overview of the controversy and how this came to light, Sandra?
Yeah, I think you've summarised it very well there. Norma Foley was asked a question about whether she thought this book, What's the Tea, was appropriate to include in the Pride Reading Guide. And she said she had no knowledge of the book, and Ben Scallon said, well, I sent it to your department. I told them I was going to ask you this question. And then subsequently, former Minister for Justice, Charlie Flanagan, has stated that he gave the Minister these books in December 2023. And he said, and I quote, he said, Norma Foley can't say she doesn't know about fisting and rimming and more in school books. She does, because I told her personally. And he said that he gave her the books in Leinster House. He discussed it with her in Leinster House, and that she almost ran away from him laughing. He was very surprised by her reaction. And it is quite worrying that she's saying she doesn't know about the books when a senior minister brought them to her attention 3 years ago. It's also deeply worrying that Children's Books Ireland don't seem to have learned their lesson, because in 2023 they had to remove another book by the same author called This Book is Gay because of similar concerns about the content in the book. So it seems that we're playing whack-a-mole. It doesn't matter how many times parents or advocates for child safeguarding say they object to certain content and the age appropriateness of it. The people who are promoting the books don't seem to be learning.
I read the book over the weekend, and aspects of it I certainly was rather shocked by. Would you talk us through some of the content of this? And I've already given out that just discretion advised for people, and just to repeat that again because of what we're talking about. I mean, the nature, 2 chapters in particular, very graphic.
Yeah, well, I suppose the focus has been on the chapter Sexy Fun Time.
Yeah.
I think even the way it's presented, it's very childish language, and we should, be aware that this book is recommended from 15 years up. Now, the age of consent in Ireland is 17. The book is written and published by a UK publishing house where the age of consent is 16. Mm-hmm. So there's a difference there. Nonetheless, as adults, we are responsible for children who are minors. Now, Sexy Fun Times talks about how a young person or someone reading the book can prepare themselves to have anal sex.
Yes.
And how to clean themselves up after having anal sex. And there's scant regard for intimacy or relationships within the book. And in addition to the quite graphic content about sex acts, I would be very concerned that the book presents anybody who queries why a child might be having identity issues, that child needs to be worried about people hating them, that anyone who queries them hates them. And that's a dreadful message to give vulnerable children. It also just bypasses transition. At one point he says, so what if you get it wrong? With no consideration of the profound physical and psychological impacts that transition has. And just for your audience, transition means taking chemical or surgical measures to alter your body so that you're trying to resemble a member of the opposite sex. And for girls, that means the amputation of healthy breasts. For boys, it means the removal of the penis and the testes. And it also includes the use of medication. And he says at one point, puberty blockers are a pause button, and if you don't like it or you change your mind, you just press play again. I mean, that's simply wrong.
Yeah, I thought that when he was talking about the idea of if you get it wrong, so what? I thought he was talking about how you identify yourself more than the more extreme aspect of this. Did I get that wrong, Sandra?
Yeah, I think I've listened to the book again over the weekend, and there isn't a serious consideration of, like, surgery is not reversible. And I think it's disingenuous. He doesn't talk in a serious way about what the impact is of surgery, and definitely is not truthful about the impact of puberty blockers. It is not a pause. You cannot press play. Once puberty starts, you have to let it work all the way through. And I think at one point he says he went through the wrong puberty. You don't go through the wrong puberty. You just go through puberty. And he was implying that because he felt he was misidentified as a boy when he was born, that he went through a male puberty when he should have gone through a female puberty. I mean, it's quite extraordinary.
Is there any excuse around this? And I'm taking into account the graphic nature of some aspects of the book. Is there any excuse that it is sort of almost comic book-like in some stage in terms of how it's laid out? So it's simplistic for the age bracket that it's aimed at. Now, I'm playing devil's advocate here on this.
Yeah.
So what about that, Sandra?
Well, I think you have to take into consideration what's age and developmentally appropriate. So, for parents, I think this is one of the issues. That these are conversations that probably are best had with parents, rather than we used to be able to trust institutions to make the right decisions. And it's increasingly looking like we can't, because an ideological position is being taken. And so even though you could say that the book some information has to be presented in a way that's not frightening or scary, but the information also has to be appropriate for the age of the child. And in his previous book, This Book is Gay, he recommended that young people go on dating apps and organise hookups for casual sex. Now, that's just dangerous and deeply inappropriate. So I understand what you're saying, that sometimes you have to present information in a way that is accessible to a child, but the information also has to be appropriate for the child.
And can I put something else to you on that? And again, I say this with deep regret, but by the time a youngster gets to the age of 15, in the world of social media and all of that, and their access to, extreme pornography and are they not in a place where this probably wouldn't surprise them all that much, Sandra?
Well, possibly, but I think we can't take the position that, well, they're seeing it anyway, and so we can't try to protect them. It's our role as adults to safeguard, and I think that we have an issue here where it's almost become unfashionable to say some things are normal and appropriate and some things are not normal and inappropriate. And when you're responsible for safeguarding and well-being, you have to be able to tell the difference. If you can't, you're in the wrong job. And you also have to be fearless in that you're not afraid of being called a prude or old-fashioned, because your job is to protect children. And it doesn't matter what other people say about you. And if you're worried about that, then this isn't the role for you.
What did you make of some of the conversation around the idea of trans being dysmorphia, dysphoria, or that type of thing? So from I suppose the medical aspect of how it might be viewed in psychiatry and the like. What did you think of when it touched on that?
Well, I think it's kind of it's complex, because I know, like, on the one hand, gender dysphoria is presented as if it is not a mental health issue. But then if it's not a mental health issue, what is it? And why does something that isn't a health issue require surgery or medication to deal with it? It's completely illogical. And I think the fact, I mean, the book was written in 2019, I believe, but it hasn't been updated to address anything like the Cass review, yes, which was very, very clear about how careful we have to be with young people who are in this distress where they are deeply uncomfortable with their sex body. And I think it's interesting in the book, you asked about like other things that concerned me. It did come across to me that Juno Dawson is a gay man, and when he wrote this book as gay, he wrote it as a gay man. And somewhere along the way, he has convinced himself or become convinced that he is a woman. But there were references to how he wasn't accepted as an effeminate boy. And there was a very dark joke in the Tavistock clinic, which, was the subject of the Cass review. It's the biggest gender clinic in the UK. And the clinicians there said, at the rate we're going, there'll be no gay children left, because the transitioning is a way, if you live in a homophobic society, of getting the effeminate gay boy or the butch lesbian out of view, because you effectively turn them into what looks like heterosexual people. You turn the butch lesbian into a gay boy, and you turn the effeminate boy into a girl. It's profoundly homophobic. I thought that was something that struck me in the book.
Where Children's Books Ireland is concerned, and I spoke to Peadar Tóibín, the leader of Aontú, earlier on, and he's going so far as to say that the organisation should be brought before an Oireachtas committee to explain themselves. Would you go along with that?
I think I would, because they get state funding, and they've just they've sought €68 million to increase access to books in libraries and in schools. Now they're not seeking specifically to distribute this reading list, but if that organisation doesn't see what the issue might be with the content of books that it promotes and the ages it's promoting them to, I would be very concerned about the influence that they might have on what books are chosen for promotion in schools and in libraries.
Now, their reason for existing, it's important to point out, is a very fine one indeed, because they're dedicated, I understand, to the fostering of a love of reading in children and young people, which is to be commended. I'm sure you would agree, Sandra.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it would be fair to say that otherwise, they do good work. But the fact that they got this so wrong twice, the same reading list in 2023 was the subject of controversy. It was the same author, and again in 26, the same reading list and the same author. And they when they took the book, This Book is Gay, off the list in 2023, the HSE also took the book off their recommended reading list, because it was on their reading list as in a toolkit to be used by teachers teaching SPHE. So they obviously have influence, and this is back to the chain of trust. We should be able to trust that the organisation that promotes literacy and promotes the love of reading is choosing books that are appropriate for our children. But when that trust breaks down, it's very difficult then to be comfortable about what influence they might have on €68 million worth of books being distributed across schools and libraries.
There was almost a dismissal of any issue around biological men being in women's places, women's bathrooms, for example. Mm-hmm. That was sort of pushed aside as being a relevant issue.
Yeah, well, I think this comes back to this thing. He says it in the book as well, that trans people.
Sorry, just to add, you know that Juno Dawson this time would look at himself as a transgender woman. So she, I believe, is what.
Yes. Well, Juno Dawson says in the book that trans people are denied their human rights. And I mean, that's just not true. They're human and they have the same rights as everybody else. What he's talking about is the conflict between the additional rights that are being sought by trans and non-binary people and how they conflict with the rights of mainly women and children. And so this idea that a man who identifies a woman has the right to use a female-only space. If you permit that, that means that single-sex provision for women is gone. As soon as a man enters a space that was once only for women, it is no longer a woman-only space, regardless of how that man identifies or whether or not he has a piece of paper from the state that says he is now a woman. He was born male. He will always be male. He can think about himself as he wishes. He should not be discriminated against for that. He should not be ridiculed for that. But we have to accept that the only person who can be a trans woman is someone who was born male and will always be a man. And this is the conflict. So when people talk about kind of the issue around men coming into women's spaces and the lack of rights of trans people, what they're actually talking about is wanting more rights than other people, women, and that those rights of women are less important than the feelings of the man who wants to enter the woman's space or compete against her in sport.
Where does RTE fit into this in terms of their culpability, if I can use that word? What do you think about RTE in this?
Well, I think, so let's be honest, media organisations receive press releases all the time. And, you know, journalism is being kind of eroded. There isn't the same amount of people to check things out. And I think sometimes RTE seems to just print a press release as if it's news. It's just regurgitating what people are giving it. I think they knew, or they should. I'm
sure they would disagree with you profoundly on that.
I'd love to go on and discuss that with them. But the link to this reading list, it was also on Kids RTE, so it's being promoted within the kids section of RTE. And the fact that they took the link out of the story tells you that, well, at least they took it seriously. But they would have been aware that CBI had the same issue 3 years ago. And nobody thought to go through the list and have a look and see if, you know, Juno Dawson was still there and maybe ask questions to go and have a look at it. And I think RTE are very, very reluctant to address any issue around sex and gender since the Liveline issue in 2022 when Joe Duffy had women on for 3 days talking about why we need single-sex spaces, why the conflict of rights has to be addressed, and women have to be favoured because we're entitled to same-sex provision. And that caused huge controversy. There was a threat to bring RTE before an Oireachtas committee because they dared give women an opportunity to say, we think we deserve spaces where men are not present when we are in a state of undress or are vulnerable or in sport. And the Oireachtas and politicians were outraged by that, but don't seem to be outraged by the fact that inappropriate material could be presented to children in such a casual manner. It's really quite remarkable. So I don't really have much faith in RTE addressing anything to do with sex and gender in a fair manner, I have to be honest.
Sandra, we appreciate your time today, and thank you very much indeed for coming on with us. Thank you. Good morning to you.
Fran.
Bye-bye to you now. That's Sandra Adams there, and Sandra is an advocate for women's sex-based rights, child safeguarding and fact-based education. 1800 938 007. The text and WhatsApp is 083 311 3311.
Tipp FM's Tip Today.
With Slattery's Garage, Puck On. Main Peugeot dealers in the Premier County. And now stocking the full range of the luxury French car brand DS Automobiles. Book your test drive today with Slattery's Garage, Puck On. See slatterysgarage.ie. Tip Today, in association with Slattery's of Pecan, your main Peugeot dealer for over 50 years in the Premier County. slatterysgarage.ie.
And a lot of response to that conversation there with us, Adams. We'll get back to some of it in just a little while. But right now it's time for Global News, and Thomas Conway from the Nina Guardian is with me. Good morning to you, Thomas.
Good morning, Fran.
Good to see you today. There's always plenty where Global News is concerned, but I suppose those attacks overnight and yesterday, Israel and Iran once again. So the ceasefire is over?
Over, essentially. It has all kicked off again, it appears. Now, I think Tehran struck first on this occasion. Donald Trump was on the phone to Netanyahu and he told him not to respond, not to strike back. But as we were discussing off air, Netanyahu defied him. Yeah. And what a surprise. I mean, this has become common now. But yeah, so it signals, I think the ceasefire was very shaky anyway. You saw what was happening in southern Lebanon. Yeah. And there were frequent breaches of that. Iran made it very clear that as long as those breaches continued, as long as Israel continued to attack southern Lebanon, that the ceasefire would be threatened. And Tehran has now promised continuous attacks over the course of this week. So it's a very fraught situation. It's hugely tense, I would imagine, in the region, and of course the oil price has gone spiralling north as well. Of
course. I heard a Lebanese MEP, or MP maybe this morning, making the point though that and separating Hezbollah from the Lebanese people.
Yeah, important to make that distinction, I guess, because Hezbollah is a terrorist organisation, and there is no doubt it has been attacking northern Israel and probably has made life hell for the residents of northern Israel for many, many years. But Israel, I suppose, is seizing its opportunity now, to put it in one way, and trying to eliminate the Hezbollah threat from the north. But in doing so, I think it's killing many civilians and probably committing war crimes in the process.
There was yet another interview with Mr. Trump that turned out to be
on NBC. It was filmed in Wisconsin on Friday. I think it only aired last night. But anyway, he loses it. Walks out of the interview, grabs his microphone, which was attached to his shirt, puts it on the ground, stamps on it, and walks out of the interview. And then obviously goes on a tirade regarding the mainstream media, NBC, CNN, etc., etc. And I think there is something in it, because I think it highlighted that Donald Trump is under a bit of pressure at the moment. I mean, things are not going his way, to put it mildly. I mean, this latest breach of the ceasefire in the Middle East is not doing his reputation any good. He's clearly frustrated by it. We'll talk about the Ukraine war in a second. His attention seems to have been diverted from that. He has midterms coming up in the autumn, early winter, and they're putting pressure on him. And so I think he's not in a good place at the moment.
As you say, we're going to talk about Ukraine, and particularly, I suppose, Putin's rejection of Zelensky's offer. But he did present himself at Downing Street, of course, for a very important meeting at this point.
Yeah, Merz, Macron, Starmer there last night, and I saw Zelensky in the aftermath gave an interview to Sky News. He was quizzed by the Sky News presenter Yalda Hakim. She asked the pressing questions, skeptical questions like, why is Ukraine sending drones and stuff towards, that forum in St. Petersburg, flagship forum for Vladimir Putin, which he spoke at. Ukraine attacked it over the weekend. Why is it sending drones in that direction if it wants peace talks? Because clearly that is going to aggravate Russia. And he kind of responded by saying, well, look, the diplomatic route is preferable, but this is what we have to do because this is the only language Putin listens to. Now, obviously there have been Russian attacks back and Russia is the aggressor in this situation. But I read the letter which Zelensky penned to Putin last week, and, there was kind of a mocking tone to it.
There wasn't there? I mean, how much of a genuine letter of looking for peace was it?
I think he knew in sending it that it was going to be rejected out of hand, but it certainly wasn't the language of diplomacy. Now, you can argue, Russia has not taken a diplomatic line either, and Vladimir Putin has consistently refused to meet with Zelensky. He says come to Moscow, but Zelensky says that would not be appropriate, and you can see why. Again, the whole thing has stalled, but I think that meeting yesterday in Downing Street between the four leaders was an attempt to wrest back a bit of momentum and maybe catch the eye of Donald Trump and get his interest in the whole situation again. But, now I've heard reports that Ukraine is actually doing well on the battlefield at the moment, that it has actually made a couple of gains and the situation is not as grim as it might have been last winter. So, I mean, maybe Vladimir Putin is the one under a bit of pressure, but there is no doubt the bottom line is it is now Europe's war. I think the US, has increasingly walked away from the playing field, and it's Europe's responsibility now. And we will see what comes in the forthcoming
what
weeks.
about the state of Russia at the moment? Because I know that Putin is shrugging off claims that the economy is falling apart because of the cost of the war. But how true is that? Yeah,
it's very hard to get information inside of Russia. I follow a guy called Steve Rosenberg. He's the BBC Russia correspondent, and he does a morning paper review most mornings, and you will get some kind of articles expressing dissent towards Vladimir Putin, soft dissent. But there's no doubt it has to be under pressure at this stage. I mean, it been under the weight of Western sanctions for I don't know how long now. And granted, he has constructed a war economy, a kind of a fortress economy based on the war industry. And, with all, you have, I think, disparities in terms of the economic picture across the country. Certain places might be doing okay. Others, which has lost industry to Western sources, will be struggling. But there doesn't seem to be any hint of an uprising against Putin at the same time, because there's no direct successor to him there. But I guess the more pressure, it has existed for a couple of years in this situation now. And I think there's a 21st round of sanctions due to be passed by the European Union. We'll see where they go. But yeah, certainly Vladimir Putin under a degree of pressure.
It'll be interesting to see. Now, Micheál Martin has said the Republic here doesn't want to have any hand in the supply of material for producing weapons that would be doing brutal damage to Ukraine, and it's making reference there to Aontú and the alumina. There's an investigation happening there.
There's an investigation happening, and you can see why it's a very, very tricky one.
Would you just give us the background to that? Because there's a lot of confusion around
essentially,
the world.
Alumina is an aluminium manufacturer. It manufactures aluminium, I'll mix up my words here, but in the Shannon region.
Yes.
And that aluminium is transported to Russia, where it makes its way indirectly, I suppose, into the Russian military-industrial complex, or that is the claim anyway. And in fairness to the Irish Times, they've done huge investigation into this with a number of other global media organisations.
And the ownership of...
Owned by a guy called Oleg Deripaska, who is seemingly one of Putin's, I've heard him described as Putin's favourite oligarch.
Yes.
And he is the man who ultimately has control over this, or he has the main stake in the company, Rusal. I think, look, I'll give you my honest opinion. I think this has to stop. But I acknowledge it is a remarkably tricky situation for the government when you consider there's 800 people indirectly or directly employed by the factory.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see how they manage it. I mean, it is inflicting damage on Ireland's international reputation, I can tell you that, because there are a lot of commentators overseas saying, things along the lines of, well, Ireland is a Russian colony. How can it be doing this? There's a lot of negative sentiment being directed towards us.
I thought that alumina was not contained in the sanctions.
Yeah, so by the letter of the law, maybe they're not breaching sanctions. I suppose the investigation will reveal that in full. But I think, looking at it more broadly, I think the message it sends is completely the wrong one. It sends a message that Ireland is kind of getting away with this while there are men dying on the front line in Ukraine fighting for Europe, and Ireland is completely detached from the situation way over on the western side of the continent. Even though Ireland has been good to Ukraine. And I think that's worth saying. We took in a lot of Ukrainian refugees at the onset. At huge cost to us, a lot of social acrimony as a result of it, but still did it. So, it would be a pity to lose our reputation over that. Ireland also, has the upcoming Council of the Presidency of the European Union, which is a huge diplomatic event for the country. It's going to host a summit of the European political community. Zelensky will probably be there. All the European leaders will be there, and this is the backdrop to it. I mean, it's very uncomfortable for the government now, and we'll see what that investigation yields.
It'll be interesting, but I mean, what local politicians in the area of Aughanish will agree to? The dismantling of this industry,
and you can understand them. I mean, what if it was outside Nina or outside Clonmel?
Absolutely.
I mean, you have to put yourself in their shoes. I mean, there was one politician. There was a social media clip went viral of him saying, essentially comparing the situation, Netanyahu and Putin, and maybe defending the plant. And I felt sorry for him because, what was he meant to do when there are jobs on the line? It's all very well. It's easy for me to say it, I mean, or it's easy for outside commentators, but it's a different situation when you're on the ground in the region.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, though, as you say, what happens where that is concerned and the results of the investigation.
Yeah, it certainly will. I mean, Ireland will have to tread a careful diplomatic line here. But big decision, I'd say, for the government.
All right, let me take a break, Thomas. We'll be back with more global news in a moment.
Tipp FM's Tip Today.
With Slattery's Garage, Puck On. Main Peugeot dealers in the Premier County. And now stocking the full range of the luxury French car brand DS Automobiles. Book your test drive today with Slattery's Garage, Puck On. See slatterysgarage.ie. Tip Today, in association with Slattery's of Puckon, your main Peugeot dealer for over 50 years in the Premier County. slatterysgarage.ie.
And Thomas Conway is with me. We're still talking global news. It's important to point out, though, before we move on, that where the alumina issue is concerned, that quite a lot of alumina goes to Europe.
Yeah, I think 55% of it is actually directed into the European supply chain. And then,
so if anything happens down there, could it damage?
Yeah, and I think that is the argument, and probably the reason why sanctions haven't been introduced thus far, is that it would do more damage to the European economy or the European alumina or aluminium sector than it would the Russian one. So you can see why, but I guess people are missing that point in the commentary around it. And basically think we're standing up for, or we're supporting the Russian military-industrial complex, which is not a good image.
Let us move to Armenia then. What's happening there, Thomas?
Yeah, very interesting election over the course of the weekend. Results still emerging, but it looks like a pro-European, the incumbent Prime Minister, Nicole Pashinyan, is going to emerge as the winner in a highly strategic part of the world. Armenia is a country in kind of the South Caucasus. It's wedged in between Turkey, Russia, and actually Iran to the south. So it shares a border with Iran. Right beside it is Azerbaijan. And the reason I point that out is because the two fought a war over a disputed territory called Nagorno-Karabakh a couple of years ago. Yes. Azerbaijan actually effectively won that war and seized the region. Armenia had a relationship with Russia, and up until that point, Russia had essentially been supporting it. It stood by as Azerbaijan took the Nagorno-Karabakh region, and from that moment on, Armenia kind of pivoted towards Europe, and that was only a couple of years ago. And I suppose the fact that this guy Pashinyan has secured a mandate now, he had quite a pro-European message. European leaders in Brussels will probably be delighted. But, I mean, don't think for a sec, like European Union membership, which might be a far-off aspiration, is still a long way away from it. And it's a good deal away from the European continent as well.
It's interesting, yeah, and so it's not. It doesn't have a democracy for very long, then, does it?
No, it's relatively. I mean, you think it emerged from, I suppose, the Soviet era in 1991, and that, and it's only in recent years that it has kind of developed a more robust democracy and a credible democracy, and I suppose there probably still are question marks, but as far as I can see, or as far as I've researched, as far as my research goes, it looks like this election was transparent enough and it was fair enough.
Right. But they might be looking to the West, but they trade a lot with Russia.
Yeah, huge. Yeah, Russia is essentially the largest trading partner. So that will tell you historically they were very, very closely aligned with Russia. And you can see why. It's in Russia's orbit. It's in Russia's sphere of influence. Beside Georgia, as I said, Turkey, Iran, Azerbaijan, that whole Caucasus region is really Russia's backyard, if you want to put it that way. But it's an uncomfortable one for Vladimir Putin, the fact that it has gone now in a different direction, or that it is going in a different direction. And I think a sign that, he is distracted by the war in Ukraine, and he's put a lot of Russia's resources into that. And maybe in other respects, Russia is losing sway or losing influence over other regions and other countries, the likes of which Armenia could be included.
It's very interesting. So to the World Cup then, and what you describe, Sam, as the most political World Cup of all time, and that's fair, isn't it?
I think it probably is. Yeah. I mean, I'm just thinking, even in recent times, Russia in 2018, that was heavily controversial. It actually went off very well. Qatar 2022, obviously because of Qatar's human rights record and that, very controversial as well, and migrant labourers. But this, I suppose, because of Mr. Trump largely and what he's doing, reshaping the world and remaking the world, this is very controversial, and the war in Iran feeds into that.
Why so? Because it's three countries, is that?
That is one of the main elements. So people will be aware: Mexico, Canada, the United States. Majority of the games are in the United States, but it was a joint bid, and it was only put forward in 2018 in Mr. Trump's first term. And we're now at a point where relations between the three countries are very fractious. I mean, I see Mark Carney is actually coming to Ireland, the Canadian PM, next week. Trump's rhetoric about the 51st state, and then relations with Mexico are not good either. And Mexico has had its own problems in relation to gang violence. We had the riots that broke out a couple of months ago, and the security situation in that country has led many to ask, is Mexico up to this? Is it...
And what about the Canadian-Mexico relationship, for example?
Yeah, that's not great either. I mean, obviously you've Carney on the one side, you've Claudia Sheinbaum, the Mexican leader, and relations between the two haven't been great either. So there isn't a lot of chemistry, there isn't a lot of harmony between the three.
Is it, me being the eternal optimist, is it possible that this might heal things to some degree?
I actually think so myself, because I mean, if you look at even past examples, I mean, the Russia 2018 was a success in many regards. I know what's happened since, the tables have turned, but I think this might be an opportunity to bring the three countries together. Like, I think Mr. Trump will obviously want it to go well.
He needs a win. If
he needs a big win.
Yeah.
And he'll be hosting everyone on the world stage. America, the glare will be on America. The other thing to mention, the critique of it is the tournament is dispersed or scattered throughout three countries. So, the distances are vast. And
is Mexico, from an infrastructure point of view, are they ready for this?
That's a big question. I mean, I'd say the stadiums are just about ready, but things like public transport and that, open question mark as to whether they're ready, and will be okay for fans travelling in.
God forbid, could this be a target for terrorism?
I think the fact that America is hosting in particular. I mean, the Iranian team, there was a whole visa controversy over the weekend. They had been granted visas, and then some of them hadn't been. And they're now staying in Mexico and playing their 3 games in America. So that will be very, very interesting. I'm not sure the permutations of the draw. Is there a situation where the US and Iran could meet? I think they played once before, or they played in 1998, and it went off fairly well. But obviously there's a different dynamic now with the two countries effectively at war. So look, to be honest, I love the World Cup. I'm looking forward to it. But I think the football will almost be secondary this time.
It's interesting. A couple of other things before we go. J.D. Vance has been rather outspoken about that murder in Britain. What's he been saying?
Yeah,
Thomas?
He blamed it. This is the murder of Henry Novak. Footage emerged last week. We touched on it on Friday on the panel. He blamed it on a mass invasion of migrants and called for righteous anger, like Nigel Farage, who called for pure cold rage. I was watching David Lammy, the former UK Foreign Secretary, and a personal friend of Mr. Vance, on the television yesterday. He said he spoke to him, and he said he openly disagreed with him. But I mean, the whole thing has been politicised. It is, it was a heinous murder. It was it was effectively a case of reverse discrimination, where the police thought this Henry Novak had issued racial slurs against a Hindu Sikh man, and that hadn't been the case, and he had been stabbed several times. And by the time that was discovered, it was too late. So it's a very, it does fuel the likes of Tommy Robinson. Elon Musk has weighed in as well. So, heavily politicised, as you would imagine.
Downing Street were fairly upfront in what they said as well. They said they didn't appreciate somebody trying to interfere in the democracy.
Strong statement from Number 10. And, because it has been heavily politicised. And I think, Starmer will look to people like Elon Musk and how he has said in the past he has a very bad influence on the democracy there, and is fueling the support for Tommy Robinson, that right-wing figure, who I think is very dangerous. So, I mean, a strong statement from Downing Street indeed.
The Ebola outbreak in Central Africa as well is becoming even more worrying at this point, isn't it?
Yeah, it is really, because, I mean, cases have escalated, but they're also projected to increase further. And the response has been complicated by... There's an armed conflict between essentially the Congo and a Rwanda-backed rebel group in the country. I also heard a podcast over the weekend. There's superstitions and conspiracy theories surrounding it, that the Congolese government have created the outbreak and things like that, that witchcraft has been involved. So there are all sorts of... Theories.
There's all sorts of cultural issues around that as well, like the washing of the bodies, for example, that could be adding to the spread.
Yeah, and the bodies, in the case of Ebola, I understand bodies are infectious. They have to be disposed of in a proper manner. It's traumatic for that country because, as I said, it's rocked by political instability anyway.
China and North Korea. Very important meeting there.
Yeah, it is. It's a big one today. I saw images of Xi Jinping arriving this morning. The Chinese leader Xi Jinping is meeting Kim Jong-un in North Korea, a rare trip to North Korea. It's his first visit in nearly 7 years, and it's his first visit out of the country this year. So there's been a steady stream of leaders going to Beijing, but this time Xi Jinping is travelling to North Korea, to Pyongyang, and the relationship there is funny because they're allies, but it's an uneasy partnership. I don't think Xi Jinping approves of Kim Jong-un and his nuclear program, and even the relationship with Russia. North Korea has got very close to Russia, sending troops to the front line and that. I think Xi Jinping is a little bit uncomfortable with that. And it'll be interesting to see how this visit goes. I'd watch the...
Is President Xi playing them all? I mean, recently he's had Putin, he's had Trump, and now he's in North Korea. Is he playing everybody?
I think he kind of is. I think I think he's probably the most savvy world leader out there at the moment, of the big powers anyway. I think he's forward looking, he thinks he's a very strategic thinker. And he plays his cards very, very carefully. You'll notice like the silence in relation to the war in Iran and things like that. I think this is a big moment for North Korea as well. But it remains a country we know comparatively little about because of the restrictions.
Well, that's for certain. Thomas, pleasure as always. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
indeed. Thomas Conway with our global news slot. News and information is on the way.
Tipp FM's Tipp Today.
With Slattery's Garage, Puck On. Main Peugeot dealers in the Premier County. And now stocking the full range of the luxury French car brand DS Automobiles. Book your test drive today with Slattery's Garage, Puck On. See slatterysgarage.ie. Tipp Today, in association with Slattery's of Pecan, your main Peugeot dealer for over 50 years in the Premier County. slatterysgarage.ie.
Thanks, Pat, and welcome back to the final hour of Tipp Today. 1800 938 007. Now, the winner of our €50 voucher for Slattery's in Nina, celebrating 80 years in business, is Margaret Bevins from Shinrone. Well done to you, Margaret. And we have another €50 to give away tomorrow and, in fact, every day this week. Now, Oireachtas committee chairs are seeking to boost their pay by up to €10,000 a year, and it could cost you and I, the taxpayer, almost €300,000 extra per annum. That's according to today's Irish Daily Mail. Now, at present, Oireachtas committee chairs who were nominated by party leaders receive an additional payment of €11,329 on top of the TD salary of €118,000 plus. Deputy Michael Murphy was named in the piece, and Deputy Michael Murphy is chair of the Dáil Transport Committee, and he joins me now. Good morning to you, Michael.
Good morning, Fran.
Good to talk to you today. I was speaking to the Aontú leader, Peadar Tóibín, earlier on in the programme. He said that this is absolutely shocking and completely tone deaf. Do you want to tell us about this?
Yeah, so look, the article itself combined two issues, Fran. The first issue of pay, and indeed my comments within the article itself were not about increasing pay, but just on the pay issue, Fran, I want to be very clear with your listeners. I'm not campaigning for an increase. I haven't sought an increase. Indeed, throughout my entire political career, since when I began in 2009, I've never sought any kind of an increase on this particular issue as well. I can confirm that I never approached the minister responsible, Minister Chambers. I've never approached members of the commission who may or may not actually have a responsibility in terms of making any decision around increasing pay. But I just want to be very clear on that. Under no circumstances.
Right, but just for clarity, are you one of the 29 committee chairs who want to see these?
So I'm one of the 29 committee chairs. I believe there was a meeting of the chairs. There's a working group back in January of this year. I wasn't actually at that meeting, but there was...
right, but you're included in that 29, and my understanding, certainly what I'm reading today, is that that particular group of 29 committee chairs, Michael, want to see recession-era cuts reversed to almost double the salary top-ups to €20,000.
Well, so first of all, Fran, I wasn't at that meeting, and I can't be any clearer than this. I'm not looking for an increase. I haven't campaigned. I haven't.
Right, but were they speaking for you? Were they speaking on your behalf?
I can't say, Fran. I would you believe it? The first I became aware of this was actually only a few days before I read the article when the journalist in question contacted me. What I was focusing on, and in the article itself, and where I'm quoted, was the wider work of the committee and the human resources necessary, the administrative support necessary to do the job.
You said the workload has grown significantly in recent years in terms of legislative scrutiny and oversight responsibility. That sounds to me like a pitch, though, for to be paid more, Michael.
No, absolutely not, Fran. And if you continue to read that particular article, I go on to talk, yes, about the legislative scrutiny responsibilities, the greater public expectation. And for me, delivering for the public at the national level and the local level. So at the moment, we've got 15 members, Oireachtas members on each committee, but we only have one policy officer supporting all 15. Like, this is complex legislation at times, oversight of public bodies, reports that affect public policy. For example, the whole area of road safety, as you know, you and your listeners working extensively on that at the moment, looking at legislation around the use of horse-drawn vehicles. We have Irish Rail coming in tomorrow. I'll be talking about timetables, investment in the bus terminal here in Clonmel, the NTA in the context of local link.
Are you saying to me you don't want any extra money then, Michael? Is that it?
I don't want any extra money, Fran. I contributed the article. Most people contributed off the record. I went on the record just simply saying, calling for administrative support, even a part-time support, reallocation of existing staff.
So you want more money made available than for this staff you're talking about? Is that what it is?
The article referred to a cost, but I was just simply looking, Fran, for a reallocation of existing staff resources within the Oireachtas structure. So, and again, I want to be very categoric on this, Fran. I'm not looking for any pay increase. I haven't sought one, nor am I lobbying for one.
Are you at odds then, Michael, with the other committee chairs where this is concerned?
Well, look, I have to engage with the other committee chairs. Any allowance issue, yes, is a matter within the committee chair structure, and is ultimately a matter for the Oireachtas Commission. My focus and why I contributed honestly to that article was just looking for additional administrative support, even a part-time shared resource, so that I can do my job more effectively, so that I can deliver for the public at the national level and at the local level. And, that could be a restructuring of existing staff resources within the Oireachtas structure.
But either way, it's going to cost the taxpayer a lot more money.
Well, if it's going to, but how would it be done, Frank, if it's a reallocation
any kind of extra resources you take on to help you out in your work, for example, will obviously have a cost.
But surely, if it's a reallocation of existing resources,
what does that actually mean, Michael?
Sorry?
What does that mean? A reallocation of existing resources. What does that mean?
So within the Oireachtas structure, Fran, there's probably, at a guess, and there's people more competent, but there's probably 800 people working within the houses of the Oireachtas in different areas.
And some of them doing so little they could be reallocated. Is that it?
Sorry?
Some of them doing so little they could be reallocated. Is that?
I'm not saying that, Fran. I'm just saying, look, if only my call is just to re-examine existing resources, to explore the possibility of resources being allocated, more resources, even on a part-time basis, just to support my work that I'm doing on behalf of the public at both the national level and the local level. And I gave examples there in terms of road safety, ongoing work with Irish Rail, the NTA, bus air, and due to come in soon.
Where did the figure of 10,000 come from, Michael? Where did that come from then? I mean, so your colleagues are.
I wasn't at the meeting, Fran. It was a meeting that was held, I believe, in January of this year, where there was a discussion amongst whomever or whatever committee chairs were present at that meeting. And again, I don't have all the information for that. Apologies. I wanted to come on
but you must have
just to discuss it and give my perspective. But I want to be very clear again, Fran. I'm not looking for any increase, nor am I campaigning for one. I haven't sought one.
And will you turn it down? Will you turn it down if it's offered to you?
And look, any remuneration for office holders is determined through established public processes, not by me, not by any member of the Oireachtas. The point I want to make to your listeners is I haven't sought an increase and Frank, I'll be perfectly honest, and your listeners need to understand this. It's there won't be an increase for Oireachtas chairs. It's going absolutely nowhere.
You think it's going nowhere?
No, absolutely. Fran, look, at a time when people are struggling so much, the doubling of an allowance, it's just not going to happen.
Right. Well, but I mean, the optics of even, the article being out there at this point, I mean, Peadar Tóibín made the point that pensioners are surviving on about 15 grand a year. And, some of your colleagues' chairs, they're looking for 10 grand just kind of, thrown in on top of it.
Yeah, I completely understand, agree with that sentiment. That's precisely, Fran, where my focus is on just delivering value for taxpayers in my role as chair of the Transport Committee. And, committees, Oireachtas committees are one of the primary ways the Oireachtas holds government departments and public bodies to account. And I hope listeners understand my call not on any financial remuneration, but just in terms of additional administrative support, even on a part-time basis, to support my role so I can properly deliver for my constituents, but also for the public at the national level. Like, I just completed a very, very complex work around the pre-legislative scrutiny to do with the cap at Dublin Airport. The lifting of that cap is going to have huge impact on the public living around Dublin Airport. Very, very complex issues. So I was just literally just calling for, that we could explore existing staff resources within the houses of the Oireachtas to see could we better allocate resources so that committee chairs like myself might get that additional part-time support in terms of, for example, areas like research, so that I can do that job to the best of my ability, but more importantly, deliver for the public at the national level and the local level.
Right, but you do accept finally that the other chairs, were looking for more remuneration. They were looking for.
Yeah, more. And again, I wasn't at that meeting.
I realise that, but you would have bumped into them. You would have bumped into them since January, wouldn't you?
Probably only meets 2 or 3 times a year, I would say.
Right, but you would have bumped into these guys and gals since January, I guess. Would it not have come up in conversation?
Actually, strangely, that's not the case, Fran.
Right.
I've had very few conversations with Oireachtas chairs from across the Oireachtas. I do talk to 1 or 2 Oireachtas chairs, of course, within my own parliamentary party. And we have discussed the addition of, support staff, secretarial research staff to support our work, but never once was the additional.
Are you kind of annoyed that it was your photograph is illustrating the piece?
But look, Fran, I always try to be, I was asked by a journalist, I didn't, unlike many others, speak off the record. I made it quite clear to that journalist exactly what I said to you, that I haven't sought, nor am I looking for any increase in my, any element of my remuneration, whether it is my core salary, a number of allowances that I receive. My Oireachtas chair, under no circumstances have I approached any minister looking for a pay increase. I'm more than happy. I'm very, very well paid. I understand the sentiment out there, but I just wanted to be honest with that journalist and said, in that I did say that I did call. I want to be honest that I do call, and I continue to call for an examination of human resources, secretarial support, research support that maybe could be allocated on a part-time basis.
I'm not being critical of the journalist, but the tone of the piece is that you were setting out the stall as to why. Now, I'm just talking about optics here, Michael. That you're setting out the stall as to why you might deserve more money. That's the tone.
Well, look, and that's why. Look, no, under no circumstances. And again, and I don't want to keep repeating myself. Look, I hope I've given, an honest, and I try to be as honest to that journalist as I possibly could. And yes, there's an interpretation there that Michael Murphy is out there campaigning for an increase. Nothing could be further from the truth. I'm more than happy. I'm very well paid as a member of the Oireachtas in terms of my core salary, allowances, the remuneration for being chair, not looking under any circumstances for an increase in any of my allowances, but I do welcome and would welcome additional secretarial support so that I could, for example, do a better job in the whole area of road safety. You're well aware of my work in that regard. I'm doing a lot of work around legislation to do with the use of horse-drawn vehicles, the racing of horse-drawn vehicles, but again, also to mention, bodies like Irish Rail, NTA, Bus Éireann, like on the NTA, the town bus here in Clonmel, doing a lot of work there, and, and I make no apologies just for looking for that exploration of additional resources, human resources within the Oireachtas, as to whether I could get a part-time research assistant to assist me with my job.
Can I ask you, I was talking to Peadar Tóibín about the EU Migration and Asylum Pact as well. A lot of people at this stage, at this very late stage, God knows, very, very concerned about this because, of course, it's coming into place on Friday. Are you getting much on this, Michael?
Yeah, look, I say it's the number one issue coming into my office
Is it
at the moment, Fran, yeah.
Mm. And how do you,
look, it's,
how do you feel about this?
What I would say to that, look, migration policy, very, very complex. The real question here for me is whether the state has a fair, credible, sustainable system that on the one hand protects those that are entitled to asylum, but at the same time, it's so important that rules are enforced. And, and I've read the Pact, and contrary to some commentary, the Pact is not designed to increase migration into Ireland. Its purpose, Fran, is to create a more controlled, more effective.
But it might cost us an awful lot of money, Michael, to...
I don't. But look, under the current arrangements, Fran, asylum applications can take years to conclude. This has contributed, as you well know and your listeners well know, to pressures on accommodation, public services, and indeed, as you say, state finances. What the new system introduces is legally binding timelines. Most applications to be decided within 6 months, with some categories to be decided upon within 3 months or less. I firmly believe, Fran, that faster decisions benefit everyone. The Pact also strengthens, and this is a very important element, the screening and security procedures. All applicants will undergo identity, security and health screening, will be registered on an enhanced EU-wide Eurodac database. Another significant reform is the streamlining of the process itself. Like currently,
the majority of our
illegal,
of our illegal migrants are coming down through the north of Ireland, and surely that's going to be an ongoing issue because, of course, Britain is a part of the EU.
And that's an ongoing issue irrespective of the Pact. But just to mention one final significant reform, Fran, and that's the streamlining of the process itself. So currently, you've got multiple sequential decisions and appeals, whereas the Pact now allows for one single first instance decision followed by a single appeal, and that again reduces delays, ensures that cases are resolved more efficiently.
And what do you say to what the Labour MEP Aon O'Riordan is saying, that where the hub is concerned, that it's like something Tommy Robinson in the UK would come up with. So they have human rights issues with the Pact as well. Well, what would you say to that, Michael?
Look, there's so many concerns on both sides of the argument, particularly around the whole area of enforcement and returns. Like, one of the key benefits of the Pact, Fran, is that return decisions will generally issue alongside negative asylum decisions, and this reduces much of the complexity. Look, I fully acknowledge the frustration of many people, particularly regarding housing, public services, the cost of accommodation, provision. They're real concerns, they're legitimate, but I believe the answer is not to retain a slower, and what we have at the moment, that, a less restrictive, less effective system. And for me, the answer is to implement reforms that deliver quicker decisions, stronger controls, and better cooperation, the sharing of information with our European partners.
All right. Thanks for coming on with us today, Michael. Thank you and good morning to you. That's Deputy Michael Murphy speaking to us there. 1800 938 007. Back in just...
Tipp FM's Tip Today.
With Slattery's Garage, Puck On. Main Peugeot dealers in the Premier County. And now stocking the full range of the luxury French car brand DS Automobiles. Book your test drive today with Slattery's Garage, Puck On. See slatterysgarage.ie. Tip Today, in association with Slattery's of Pecan, your main Peugeot dealer for over 50 years in the Premier County. slatterysgarage.ie.
And welcome back to Tip Today. Speaking about the EU Pact, the Immigration and Asylum Pact, suffice to say that the listeners who are getting in touch with us today on text, WhatsApp and phone calls are against it completely and have some grave concerns about it for what it's worth. 083 311 3311. Now, Councillor Michael Chicken-Brennan has condemned repeated interference with life-saving equipment at Loch Derelict, and he joins me now. Good morning to you, Michael.
Good morning, Fran, and good morning to your listeners.
Good to talk to you today. Just for the geography of this, where Loch Derelict is near Glengule, I think, isn't it, Sir Michael?
Yeah. Well, Loch Derelict is between Glengule and Ballynunty, kind of.
Yeah.
You used to be able to enter from the Ballynunty to Littleton Road, but now you have to go over to the village of Glengule or go to Littleton and come up the Bog Road, and it's halfway up that road you turn right. And it's a lovely lake that was made and put in place by Bordnamona and Slivada Rural Development. And a lot of people use this amenity. They go down there for their morning walks, their evening walks. I also was down there yesterday evening, spillings of rain, and there was a handful of people there walking around in the rain, happy as could be. It's very peaceful. A lot of people take their children there that have autism and things like that because they love it there, and there's the water and there's the peacefulness and the tranquility of it. But I suppose, look, this is as incidents have happened before where we've seen the ropes being removed from the life buoys. Now the ropes are of a significant length, and they're also of a significant colour, red and orange. So they're really no good to anybody unless they're to the life buoys themselves. Because if somebody got stuck in the water, you can pelt them in a long way, and they'll reach the person that's in trouble. But it's very disappointing because it is life-saving equipment, and you never know when they're needed, and always when something like that is needed and you realise that the rope isn't there, that's when you could have consequences that could be very catastrophic, if the end result was a loss of a life or something like that.
I presume this was all reported to the Gardaí, was it, Michael?
It was all reported to the Gardaí now. I suppose, look, we don't have any CCTV, and we have very few little people living in after the exit road coming in from the Glengule side. So, it's very hard to track. I suppose, really, we would be looking to get the CCTV installed there now, you know what I mean? Because it is after happening now on a number of occasions, and we also want to make sure that they're vital equipment. I can't emphasise how much serious they are to have in place the life buoys. There's 4 of them altogether throughout the whole lake, and everybody has access to them. And as I said, they're no good unless the ropes are on them. And it's very disappointing that people would remove them because they're not of any purpose. You can go into Hardware store and buy a bit of rope if it's needed for something else. But please, not to take the ropes that are attached to the life buoys.
But you and I often talk about antisocial behaviour, but I can't get my head around the mindset of somebody interfering with life-saving equipment. It's...
Yeah, look, I suppose, I suppose people think we're out in the middle of nowhere, no one see me taking this, I want a bit of rope, and that's it, and that's probably the mentality.
But somebody could die because of this, Michael. Yeah.
That's the end result, Fran, and that's something that we don't want to happen. And I would say to anybody, if they do see these, they're very distinctive in colour. They're red and orange, or yellow and orange in colour. And if somebody could see them, or anyone knows anywhere they could be, or just notify myself or the local Gardaí, because we just want to make sure that these things are not happening again and again and again. And as I said, and you mentioned it yourself, the importance of they being attached to the life buoys is to save somebody that might get into difficulty, and hopefully we will get plenty of good weather over the next couple of months where people will be able to go down and enjoy the lake for what it is and have their little dive in and their swim around and the whole lot. But we want them to know that they can go down there and do it in safety, that if there is a difficulty, these life buoys are in place and the ropes are there to save someone's life.
Labour is your party. The Sunday Indo poll yesterday, Michael, you've dropped down from 4%, you've dropped 1% to 3%, Michael, at a time when the government is under fire from all angles, I suppose, and your party is losing support.
Yeah, I suppose, Fran, look, for me, on a personal level, like, it's disappointing. We have 11 TDs and 2 senators who are very hard working and doing their best, and like, here we are, sitting below, just sitting on top of the Green Party on level, and people before profit before us. Like, we have 3 times the number of TDs that them 2 parties have, but we are here just sitting on top of them, and it's very disappointing because
the Soc Dems are absolutely flying.
Well, the Soc Dems, they're a roaring success at the moment, and I suppose it's leaving Labour, who were traditionally known as centre-left party, and we're not growing, and you can see the growth that's in the Soc Dems, so, I feel, on my own personal thing, I would like to think that we're not touching the right area of the people that we need to be touching. Like, Labour represents the working class people, and we're not getting the clear message out to them people, and they are very bewildered with what Labour stands for.
It could be that, Michael, but Michael, it might be that the message that you're giving out is not one that people are looking for. I mean, you could look at it like that as well.
Yeah, look, as I said, we don't seem to have an identity, and we're very inconsistent, and we're not strongly connected to the ongoing things that are affecting people in day-to-day living, and I'm talking there in relation to the likes of rent, transport, healthcare, cost of living crisis. I don't think Labour are getting the message to the people there that we are there to support them, we are there with an alternative, and I think that's the biggest thing that's lacking at the moment is our alternative. We don't seem to be there with an alternative to the electorate and the people that we need to be engaging with. Because, as I said, Labour was always there for the working class people. We were always there, outside of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. Labour were third or fourth, sliding with Sinn Féin and the whole lot. But now, we're down at the bottom rung of the ladder, and the next drop again is down to the last rung of the ladder, and that's going to take a lot to get it back up. And I also feel like that while Labour has a good representation of 11 TDs and the 2 senators, I think a lot of it is actually down to the work that them people are doing in their own communities and the strong voice that they have. But I think nationally, as a party, we are not getting the message clear out there. And, you go back to 2011 and the austerity years and all that, but we haven't moved on from any of that.
Do you question the leadership? Do you question Ivana Bacha?
Well, look, I it's not for me to call a question on it, but I do feel that we need to get more clarity, we need to get more direction, and that's something maybe that should be dealt with now in-house and looked at. But for at the moment, as I said, we're it's very disappointing to see the success of the Social Democrats and Labour where they are at the moment, and it has to be mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling to me that it's happening because we are letting it happen. And for me, the alarm bells have to start ringing now as well, because as I said, we go down another. And the polls are telling their own stories. We might have had satisfactory success in the Galway West by-election there. We're still, we were clearly a good bit off of where we need to be and to be challenging, and we're only another 2.5 years out maybe from a general election, and we need to be setting our stall out that we are getting the message out to the people of the electorate that Labour are there for.
Are you considering your position as a Labour Party representative, Michael?
Well, look, man, I suppose I can't say exactly I'm considering it, but I would say I'm looking at it I'm very concerned of where we are. You want to be going into any election campaign that you're up at the right half of the table, not to be in the wrong part of it, because as I said, I do feel that a lot of our candidates who are very good, and there's young candidates that came on board there, and we significantly got another 5 TDs in the last election, but like if we don't look at where we are nationally, I think we are looking at maybe a decrease again, which would be detrimental, and the soft Dems would be the winners again.
You and I have spoken a number of times over the last couple of years, and you've spoken in the past about you have issues with the party. Is it not time, Michael, that you just sort of cut ties and walked?
Well, I suppose, look, man, I cutting ties, I suppose, look, my uncle spent a lot of time with Labour, and I know what Labour is about, and I know what Labour can do, but as I said, we are not, for me, the message isn't getting to the people that I represent on the street, and I hear it every day of the week, and I hear from people in Conway, God, if you were with any other one else, or if you're independent, not Labour, and that, you can take so much of that, and I get that quite regularly, on the streets, and as I say, we have sorted out the people, I think, at times, and I'm not denying that fact. But I think for Labour to get back to where they need to be, we have to look at a wider scene of where the Labour Party is at and the policies that we're driving at the moment. Because, as I said, we are not touching base with the electorate that we need to be getting the votes. And as I said, the success of Aontú, the independents and the soft Dems are just squeezing us out on the left side of things at the moment, and with Sinn Féin as well, picking up the younger voters as well, it's very frustrating to see Labour not getting any new members really much across the board, and we're finding that very difficult to get people to engage.
Sure, but with respect, everything that you're saying to me there is not conducive to you remaining in the Labour Party, Michael,
Well, look, Fran, as I said, it's something that I'm very concerned about. It's something that I have raised. I'm looking into it.
Have you spoken to Alan Kelly about this? Have you spoken to Alan? Because you're very close with Alan. Have you spoken to him about this?
I'm very close to Alan. I've spoken to Alan, and I suppose, look, Alan kind of knows that, Michael Brennan is a man that speaks his own word and will do his own thing and say his own thing. And, if it's a thing for the betterment for Michael Brennan, isn't to be within the Labour Party, if we don't change our ways, well then, it will be the one road I'd be looking at, an exit road.
Wow. So that's what it looks like Labour isn't going to change its ideology at this point, Michael. So, I mean, is that it? Is that it then?
Well, look, Fran, you'll be the first to know, but as I said, I've raised my concerns. I hope they will be looked at and addressed within the wider size of the party, like from councillors, PLP, executive level and the whole lot. And, if there's not an errand of we looking at how we can change the situation we're in, well then, as I said, I will be looking at what will be best for Michael Brennan.
Michael, good to talk to you today. Thanks for your time. Thank you.
Okay, Frank.
Good
Take
morning.
Care. Thank you.
Bye-bye. That is Labour councillor Michael Chicken Brennan there. 083 311 3311.
Tipp FM's Tip Today.
With Slattery's Garage, Puck On. Main Peugeot dealers in the Premier County. And now stocking the full range of the luxury French car brand DS Automobiles. Book your test drive today with Slattery's Garage, Puck On. See slatterysgarage.ie. Tip Today, in association with Slattery's of Pecan, your main Peugeot dealer for over 50 years in the Premier County. slatterysgarage.ie.
On this week's episode of Tipp FM Investigates Building Tipperary, Pat Murphy is talking with Care Councillor Andy Maloney, Clonmel businessman John Kennedy and Tipperary County Council Director of Services for Roads Liam Brett about the upgrade of the N24 and in particular the stretch from Care to Carrick-on-Shore.
Tipp FM Investigates, funded by the News Reporting Scheme. Building Tipperary.
Welcome to the third in the Tipp FM Investigate series. We've already looked at the long-awaited Thurles bypass and the Latra Bends project in the north of the county. Today we're focusing on the N24, which stretches from Limerick to Waterford, taking in much of South Tipp along its 127 kilometres. It's one of the few intercity routes in the country that is yet to be upgraded. However, there are plans to improve it and alleviate the many congestion points along the way, including Tipp Town, Clonmel and Carrick-on-Shore. While significant progress is being made on the Limerick Junction to Cahir section, the same can't be said of the stretch from Cahir to Carrick-on-Suir and beyond. Director of Services with Tipperary County Council, Liam Brett, told Tipp FM's Donald Doyle that the N24 is one of the worst stretches in the country when it comes to road safety.
It would be, it's a particularly unsafe stretch of road. In totality, the N24 as it goes through Tipperary would be a particular area that there's a lot of accidents on. There's a lot of accidents on that stretch of road. It's about 70 kilometres of road in total across Tipperary. So it's about 1% of our network. But in terms of accidents, the volume of accidents on it would be about 25 to 30% of the accidents in terms of the entire network. So it's a particular stretch of road that does require upgrading. And it does require to be upgraded in accordance with all the design standards that have been developed at national level. But essentially, by dividing that road, by upgrading that road and dividing it with a central median, does mean that the road would be much, much safer for everybody using it. The eastern end, that's the section from Cahir to Waterford, has been held up for the last couple of years. So it got no funding in 2024, it got no funding in 2025. Thankfully, it did get $500,000 of funding in 2026.
There needed to be a massive campaign. I remember you coming out here begging the members basically to put pressure on any way they could in terms of their political masters to get the funding for this back on the cards. And I remember talking to one of your engineers just about the absolute waste of all the groundwork that would have been done if you hadn't secured that extra bit of funding. That would have been a massive, massive problem if it hadn't happened. I suppose, tell me how big an issue that was.
I suppose it's a huge issue for the area. For many reasons, that road is required. It's required for road safety that we just discussed about. It's required for the connectivity across the area, the people that need to get through those towns. But also the state and the ports of Foynes to Rosslare, they need that improved connectivity. The businesses in the area, from an economic and regional development perspective, those businesses need the assurance that they can get goods from A to B in the time frame that they expect to be able to do it. So I suppose there's many reasons that road network required to be upgraded. There's been an awful lot of money spent on 3 different design iterations of that in the past. So certainly it was a huge concern of Tipperary County Council in recent years that it had not been funded. And I know it was a huge priority for our elected members in the council and also our Oireachtas members. They all wanted to get this project back alive, to get the design proceeding on it. And thankfully, that was successful. But in it being renamed again on the National Development Plan in November of last year. That was a significant milestone because it in itself could have been dropped off it, having not been funded for 2 years. Thankfully, it was renamed on it, and thankfully we have a funding allocation of 500,000 for this year, which does allow us to appoint a design team in approximately of September of this year to push on with that project. It's a number of years now behind the western end, so it probably will be about 3 years before the eastern end will get to Aontú Clonala. That said, it's still positive that it's now back alive, it's now progressing, and we'll have a strong design team working on that in the near future again.
Yeah, and that's where you're at. That $500,000 allows you to progress the design, and that's going to take a while, is the only problem.
It is. These projects take a number of years, and that's why it's so important that when a project is started in its design phase, that it's not stopped. Because the most efficient and effective thing for for public monies and the public taxpayer, essentially, is that these projects, once the design is started on them, that design should be continued until such time that it has got its statutory planning approval. At that point, they can rest on the shelf until such time as the state can afford to fund the construction, because they have a shelf life at that point in time. But when they're mid-design, they have no longer a shelf life, and so the funding.
And what was the problem, Liam? What was the hold-up, and what changed that allowed progress?
Well, certainly from TAI's perspective, or Transport Infrastructure Ireland, their budgets were essentially insufficient to provide funding to that project any further, and there was a number of other projects across the country in the same space, and so essentially that's what stopped the progress on the design of that for a couple of years. But thankfully that is now over, and there's a design team that in the very near future will be working on it again.
But you say it'll be 3 years before it goes to planning, which would probably take another year. So it's I suppose you wouldn't want to commit to a timeline, but in your head, what is the timeline for it?
It's very difficult to commit to a timeline in any of these, because there are so many factors that can come up in terms of the design cycle. As I say, there's probably about 3 years of design work to be done on that project, but that's assuming that no national policy changes in an area which can extend the design life. It then goes to a commission in Pleanála for a period of time. That depends on how the number of challenges that it goes through at that stage, and that will take a significant period of time. And following that, some of these projects can be the subject of a judicial review. So it certainly will be a number of years. The important thing is that we keep them progressed. And like I said earlier, we have 5 projects now in the National Development Plan, all that are progressing. And the importance is that we keep these progressed so that we get, every couple of years, we get the next one to construction. Like, the total investment across those 5 projects is approximately 2 billion. So the investment in Tipperary would be very, very significant should we keep all of them going through the design life cycle.
John Kennedy Motors is one of the businesses which has felt the impact of increasing traffic numbers on the N24 over the years. The Toyota dealer is just off the Cashel Road roundabout in Clonmel. John says he was very interested when the proposals for an upgrade of the Inner Relief Road were first mooted.
We're here a long time, and we're very near the junction, so we're very conscious of the safety aspect of entering and exiting the business premises as such, so we actually suggest people to go left. But over the last number of years, it has certainly got even more congested, and at particular times in the day it's backed up quite significantly up the hill, and it can be, from a business point of view, it's access can be difficult for customers from time to time, and they would say it to us, but it's just something we've lived with for quite a while now. And I actually went to the Talbot Hotel with interest to see what was going to be some of the remedies for these things some time back. I think it was last year sometime. But yeah, we've learned to live with it over the last number of years.
Now, there has been talk for quite a while of upgrading the N24. It seems at this stage that Carrick-on-Suir will get a bypass. Cahir, of course, is already bypassed, but Clonmel, there doesn't seem to be any definite move towards, we've got the Inner Relief Road. There doesn't seem to be talk of an Outer Relief Road again.
Yeah, well, the original plan, I think, at the business park up the top of the hill in Ardgeha was to have an outer ring road, which seemed to be prudent planning, because the roads are not going to get calmer. They're just, if anything, there's more traffic going to. So I think you have to kind of budget for a larger element of traffic, not a lesser element of traffic. But that seems to be gone by the wayside. I think the budget isn't there for that. So when I did go up to the Talbot to see the plans, I didn't quite see where the remedy was going to be there. Not certainly from where we're looking now in my office out the door there. At certain periods of the day, it's very, very, very congested.
The fact as well that the whole upgrade is taken in a number of stages. You've got Limerick Junction to Cahir and Cahir to Waterford. The Limerick Junction section seems to be progressing much quicker. Do you think more needs to be done, be it from a political point of view or from your own business side of things, a harder push to make sure that Cahir Waterford progresses at a pace as well?
I would certainly think so. I mean, Clonmel, there's a train of thought here in the town that Clonmel is somewhat forgotten over the last number of years in terms of upgrades and any kind of incentives to upgrade the town. So that certainly would be a sentiment that you would hear often from people. It's pretty critical, I would say, that it's addressed and addressed quickly. I'm not 100% sure what the current plan is will address it properly, because, listen, I don't know enough about it, but there is not going to be less traffic coming on the roads. There is going to be more traffic coming on the road. So I would have thought you need to budget for a larger increase, not kind of a piecemeal, which seems to be what we're going to get, I think, eventually, you know.
Cahir was once known as the crossroads of the south, with all Cork, Dublin and Limerick Waterford traffic going through the centre of the town. However, local councillor Andy Maloney says the N24 bypass some years ago, followed by the M8, have eased the chronic congestion.
We can see the benefits of being bypassed twice in Cahir. And the N24 as well, as you quite rightly said, is 2 stages. It's Limerick to Cahir, Cahir to Waterford. It'll bypass the town again as such, because it'll take a new life when it gets to Knock Roundabout. And I suppose it has taken a lot of time and effort and design, and I can go back probably 30 years when they were talking about it, bypassing McKeevan and at that time. But look, it's badly needed. There's more and more cars on the road, the populations are growing, there's 2 and 3 cars in every house, unlike back in those days where there was only 1 car in the house. And if we don't act now, we're going to be in big trouble in the next 8 or 10 years. And that's why we need to keep the N24 alive and make sure that it does come into fruition in the coming years.
A lot of people along the route, particularly in Clonmel, are concerned that there doesn't seem to be an actual plan to bypass the town, that the Inner Relief Road, which is a car park at the best of times, at commuting times, that's still going to be the way around Clonmel.
Yeah, and if you look at it from the sky, like we always, and the submission showed as well, that most people that were in favour in the Cahir section at Knocka was the 2x1 lane, and on by Barn there was plenty of room there. There was no need even to CPO land, because the land is there idle beside us, and there was no need to do it, and that was quite rightly pointed out. But I think when you look at the satellite from the sky, when you get to Ballingrane and you can see the roundabouts at the top of Argea, at the top of the Cashel Road, at the top of, we'll say, Powerstown, there is actually a network, a road that could be put across there. So I would say all is not lost yet, even though what they're talking about at the moment is leaving the link road as a true road, and the top of overpasses and so forth to come onto that link road, something like you'd have in the South Ring in Cork. Look, the engineers, they seem to think it will work, but will it work for now and for 10 years, but will it work in 30 years' time? I don't know. But I do think that the capacity is there to bypass the town through those link roads and those roundabouts, bypassing completely on the outside. I think that's still there when you look at satellite images.
Finally, Andy, looking at as we were talking about, the fact that the Cahir to Limerick stretch is progressing at a faster rate than Cahir Waterford, what needs to be done by politicians, by business people, etc., to make sure that the Cahir Waterford hopefully catches up and doesn't fall behind even more?
Well, I suppose pressure needs to be put on government to make sure that funding is allocated every year. That's for sure and certain. The delay, it may not be such a bad thing if there's a couple of years of a delay, because with the scope of tendering process and the contractors and so forth, that there might be a better bargain to be got. But definitely, look, even we talk with Limerick to Cahir, can I see Limerick to Cahir in the next 10 years? No. Can I see Tipp Town bypassed and come out of Gralla? Yes. Does it stop there? I don't know. But I definitely think that the pressure has to be kept on at a government level to make sure that the funding keeps coming. Look, at the moment we probably have 10 million spent on design and feasibility studies. Someone would say to you, build a lot of road, which you probably would, but these studies have to be done. That's what I can see at the moment, and I can't see any further than that, because we're being hit with wars, we're being hit with diesel prices, everything has a knock-on effect. So I don't know where the money's going to keep coming from, and will they have the money to do it in the near future? I don't know. But at the moment, Tipp Town, I think the commitment has been made to do that stretch. Tipp Town stretch could bypass Bancha as well, come out of Gralla. Could I see us being held up after that again? I could.
That's our look at the N24 upgrade from Cahir to Waterford. We'll be examining the Limerick Cahir section in more detail in a future episode.
Tipp FM investigates. Funded by the News Reporting Scheme. Building Tipperary.
And that's our own Pat Murphy there with the latest episode of Tipp FM Investigates Building Tipperary. Leanne is with me. Morning, Leanne.
Good morning, Fran.
You've been traipsing through the archives once again. What have you got?
I've been going through the archives, so you'll have to wait till tomorrow for this.
Oh.
But it's a bit of a surprise, because we're going back about 9 years, and this time it's one of yours.
one of mine.
It's something
that you found in the archive.
That I found in the Tipp FM archives that's back in the headlines this week.
Okay. You're going to give me a hint?
I'll give you a hint. So it was about a murder investigation that didn't happen in Ireland, but was linked to Ireland.
Okay. Oh, I know what you're talking about. Is it Sophie Toscan-de-Plantier?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's
Ian Bailey.
Ian Bailey. So obviously he was convicted in France.
Yes.
And became kind of like a prisoner in Ireland. There was a warrant out for his arrest. So I found a clip from 2017 when you went to Dublin and you met Ian after his case in the forecourts.
I remember it well. So are you going to play some of that tomorrow?
We're going to play it tomorrow because he's back in the headlines even though he's passed away, because it was revealed by his sister that his DNA was taken again in the lead up to his death, that he was still the main suspect.
Very interesting indeed. All right, it'll be gas to hear that. What else have you got for us?
The knife crime is causing a huge stir. A lot of people are very afraid. A lot of people naming shops that are selling them. You can see them in the window.
I know.
Very interesting point is some listeners wondering if there's a link between violent video games and the violence we're starting to see on the streets in Ireland.
It's a very good point.
Yeah, so if our young people have become desensitised, and with social media, obviously a lot of awful execution style videos went out in the last few years. Young people are watching them. In their brains, the wiring of their brains, is it changing how they react and their need for violence as well?
Interesting. Now, Betty is going to join us. What is Betty going to talk about?
Betty is going to talk, and this is a mad one. This is why I love live radio, because someone rang in last week and mentioned the idea of being churched.
Yes.
And I kind of had to look into this because it would have been before my time.
Of course it was, yeah.
But it was that idea that a new mother was not allowed into the church. It was seen as dirty. You were after giving birth. So you used to either have to wait outside for the whole of Mass. You couldn't get communion with the congregation.
Until you were churched, which was like a cleansing process.
So you used to have to wait until all the other congregation left to go in and get the Eucharist off the priest. So Betty actually has first-hand experience of this.
Wow.
And this idea of being churched.
Okay, so we're going to chat to Betty tomorrow as well. Thanks for that, Leanne. Leanne produced. Stephen is on the way with the Time Tunnel, and we'll be back with you tomorrow. We've been in Nina today. We'll be back in our studio in Clonmel tomorrow. So do look after yourselves in the meantime, won't you? Bye-bye now.
Tipp FM's Tip Today.
With Slattery's Garage, Puck On. Main Peugeot dealers in the Premier County. And now stocking the full range of the luxury French car brand DS Automobiles. Book your test drive today with Slattery's Garage, Puck On. See slatterysgarage.ie.